Chapter 2175. A tournament regarding the way of medicine. Seeing how confused Zhongxian and Qi Ling'er was, a middle-aged physician sitting by the side of the room explained, guild leader Liao suffered some grievous internal injuries in the previous flood of spiritual energy. Over the past decade, he has been studying medical records and trying out all sorts of remedies, but there was nothing that worked. In the last 2 years, his internal injuries worsened significantly, becoming more and more severe. Guild leader Liao thought that he would meet his end just like that, but a few days ago, someone bought a beauty pill and gave it to him. Initially, he didn't think much of it, but after consuming it, he found that his internal injuries were actually lightening. So, he requested a friend to get him some more. After eating 10 of those pills, not only did he manage to recover fully from his injuries, he noticed that his lifespan increased considerably. Due to that, he's extremely grateful to you. Zhongxian nodded in realization. The wonders of the beauty pill stemmed from the infused heaven's path shenqi. It was capable of healing internal traumas and fortifying one's vitality, thus granting one greater longevity. I devoted all of my time and effort to understanding and curing my internal traumas, but I couldn't find a cure at all. In the end, it was your pill that did the job so easily. Isn't that more than enough to show that your skills in the way of medicine are above mine? Well, I guess it's not entirely wrong if you interpret it that way. Zhongxian was planning to turn down the compliment humbly, but when he thought about it, there was some truth in what guild leader Liao said. He would be humble bragging if he refused a compliment that was true, so he could only reluctantly accept those words. The Heaven's Path Shenqi was capable of healing most afflictions, and in the cases where the Heaven's Path Shenqi did not work, the patients were more or less doomed. Besides, his knowledge in the way of medicine went beyond just using the Heaven's Path Shenqi. The fact that he was a 9-star physician back on the master-teacher continent was evidence of his skills. He would be going against his conscience if he said that his medical skills were beneath those of guild leader Liao. Alright, I'll send a message back right now to handle the processes. I'll pass you the token required to use the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation once it's done, Liao Xin replied. In truth, there was no need for him to go all the way there to partake in the physician tournament. He was esteemed enough in the physician community to not have to prove himself. The main reason he had gone there was to meet his benefactor and thank him in person. Since his benefactor had a request, it was only right for him to fulfill his request so as to repay the favor. Just as guild leader Liao was about to take out a special communication token to pass down the order, another old man rushed into the room and exclaimed, "Guild leader Liao, you mustn't do that." Vice guild leader Wang, is there a problem? Guild leader Liao asked with a frown. The person who barged into the room was the vice leader of Cloud Dragon Royal City's physician guild, Wang Fei. Apothecary and physician are 2 separate occupations. It isn't right to mix them together just because there are some similarities between the two. It is inappropriate, Wang Fei argued. He admitted that the young man's skills as an apothecary were probably unrivaled in the current generation, especially after witnessing the effects of the beauty pill in person, but pill forging was pill forging. No matter how formidable one's pills were, that would not make an apothecary a physician. The role of a physician was to diagnose a patient and come up with the best treatment method to cure the patient. On the other hand, apothecaries forge pills out of medicinal herbs in order to elevate their medicinal properties. There was a vast difference in their specialties. By giving the right to use the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation over to this young man, guild leader Liao was indirectly admitting that his skills in the way of medicine were beneath those of the young man. If the latter showed a lack of capability afterward, that could possibly tarnish the reputation that guild leader Liao had painstakingly built. Guild leader Liao, please reconsider your decision. The other physicians in the group entered the room and bowed deeply. I am indebted to Apothecary Zhong, and I wish to repay his favor. Besides, it's about time for me to retire. Alright, there's no need to say any more. My mind is made up. Guild leader Liao waved his hand. In truth, he shared the same assessment as the other physicians. He felt that while Zhongxian was able to forge incredible pills, his medical skills were likely lacking in comparison. The main reason he had accepted the request was to repay Zhongxian's favor. Compared to his life, He felt that a small stain on his reputation did not mean much. Understanding the worries of the other physicians, Zhongxian did not lose his temper. If that's the case, shall we follow the proper process instead? The usual way to do it is through the physician tournament, right? Since everyone is here, shall we do that? He was still young, and it had not been long since he arrived in the firmament. It was normal for others to doubt his capability. You wish to challenge us in a physician tournament? Guild leader Liao asked. I'm already here anyway, Zhongxian replied with a smile. This. Guild leader Liao was a little hesitant, but seeing that Zhongxian had made up his mind, he eventually nodded in agreement. There are 4 main segments to the physician tournament, namely observation, scent, inquiry, and contact. In each step, you must jot down your diagnosis, determine the illness, write down a cure, and verify whether the cure is effective or not. Zhongxian nodded. He had been wondering how the physician tournament would work, but from the looks of it, it appeared to be no different from how physicians usually diagnosed their patients. It was just that. What about the patients? Do we involve patients in the duel? Zhongxian asked with a frown. It did not seem right to him to make a tournament with the life of the patients at stake. That infringed on the ethics that a physician should have. Of course not, Guild leader Liao replied. Then, he looked at Zhongxian doubtfully as he asked, could it be that you don't know what the physician tournament is? The young man was the one who proposed having a physician tournament, but based on what he was saying, it seemed like he knew nothing about it. He had thought that he could just admit defeat to the young man in order to return the favor. Even though he did not think that the young man would actually be more skilled than him when it came to the way of medicine, as someone who was able to create the beauty pill, he thought that the young man still would not be too bad. But based on what he had seen thus far, that did not seem to be the case. A physician who did not even know what the physician tournament was. Was he even a physician at all? The top physicians of the 9 skies have worked together to create an artifact known as the Stone of Symptoms, and it's through this that we hold the physician tournament. Seeing that Zhongxian was really ignorant of it, guild leader Liao shook his head and explained the matter. It seemed like Vice Guild leader Wang's worries were not unfounded. From the current looks of it, it appeared that the young man's medical skills were not too amazing. There was no way a skilled physician would not know about the physician duel. Stone of Symptoms? Yes, it's a unique treasure that is able to record a patient's physical condition with great precision. Through the data stored in it, it's able to generate a projection of the patient in real time to provide the physician with information. If you can provide it with a feasible cure, the projected patient will be able to recover from their ailment. As Liao Xin spoke, he took out a stone and tapped lightly on it. The stone released a light buzz before generating 10 human projections. These projections were created through a formation inscribed on the stone. Every single one of these projected humans appeared sickly, as if they had been afflicted with some sort of lethal disease. It looked like they would not live much longer without treatment. These 10 people are afflicted with diseases that have been discovered and treated from several hundred years to several millenniums ago. Through a special procedure, their conditions are logged in the Stone of Symptoms, allowing us to recreate a lifelike projection of them. Just like real patients, we can observe their symptoms, smell their scent, ask about their status, and feel their pulse. Through these 4 methods, we can determine the cause of their affliction and devise a treatment method for them. Seeing how Zhongxian was still looking at the projected patients with an uncertain look on his face, Liao Xin added, "Don't worry, the illnesses faced by these patients are not entirely obsolete. Most of these ailments are around today, even though they have been altered in one way or another through interactions with different environments. Furthermore, as the records go many years back, it's impossible for a person to memorize every case. Also, the patient's projected change randomly each time the Stone of Symptoms is activated, so you can rest assured that there's no way one can cheat." Hearing those words, Zhongxian nodded in relief. Treating a patient was much more than memory work. The same disease could have vastly different symptoms depending on a person's constitution. Based on these conditions, the treatment method devised and medicine dispensed by the physician must adapt accordingly. So, if the projected patients were the same each time, One could simply memorize the specific symptoms of the patients in advance and treat them impeccably with ease. That would render the test utterly meaningless. However, it seemed like he had underestimated the physician tournament. While the cultivators of the firmament had exceptionally good memory, there was no way they could remember all of the ailments from the current date to over tens of thousands of years back, and that was assuming that they could even find the medical records of all the patients stored within the Stone of Symptoms. This made cheating nigh impossible. After every step of the diagnosis, you are to write down your deductions. Once the observation, scent, inquiry, and contact procedures are over, you have to jot down a medical treatment and hand it over to the patient. If the medical treatment you proposed is in line with the one that cured the patient, the projected patient will be cured of his suffering. On the other hand, if you make a mistake, it'll show the corresponding result. Zhongxian nodded in response. He tapped his finger on the Stone of Symptom once more, and just as guild leader Liao said, all 10 projections changed immediately. Now that you know of the rules, let's begin. Guild leader Liao raised his hand, and 2 physicians quickly passed a few pieces of paper and a brush to them. As physicians, observing one's patient was the first step for a diagnosis. Through taking in the patient's expression, color, state, and form, one would be able to make a preliminary assessment of the symptoms he was facing. Seeing that guild leader Liao had headed toward the leftmost patient, Zhongxian quickly walked over to the rightmost patient. With one swift glance at all the projected patients, he was already able to deduce their symptoms with 80 to 90% confidence. Nevertheless, he still decided to mutter flaws beneath his breath. Hoo 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 hoo. 10 books immediately materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. While he was quite confident of his analysis, he wanted to have an absolute guarantee for this. So, he tapped into the powers of the library of Heaven's Path to double-check his diagnosis. The result of this physician tournament would determine how long it would take him to get to the sky of spirit origin and find Luo Ruoxin. He did not want to risk losing the duel and waste precious time. Even though the patients before him were only projections, he was still able to compile the analysis of their conditions through the formation that projected them. After quickly browsing through it, he heaved a sigh of relief after seeing that his diagnoses were spot on. He had not really come into contact with medicine ever since he arrived in the firmament, but back when he was still on the master-teacher continent, he had encountered all sorts of bizarre afflictions and resolved all of them with ease. His understanding of the human body and medicinal herbs had already reached a level unthinkable to most physicians. Right now, the only thing that was hindering him was the difference in constitution between gods and ordinary cultivators. As long as he could work that out, he should be able to tap into the vast knowledge in his head to cure these patients. He sat down on the floor and spent a few moments organizing his thoughts to deduce the best treatment method. Then, he swiftly wrote down the treatment methods. "All right, I'm done," Zhongxian said with a smile. "What? You are done? Really? It hasn't even been 10 minutes since the physician tournament started, right? Furthermore, you didn't even conduct the other steps of the diagnosis before going right into jotting down the medical treatment. You must be joking. How can someone diagnose all of these patients and come up with corresponding solutions so quickly?" Everyone was stunned. There was a saying that physicians were constantly wrestling with time to save their patients from the clutches of death, but still, it was impossible for a physician to diagnose and cure 10 difficult diseases in less than 10 minutes. "Are you sure you aren't pulling our legs?" The crowd looked at one another before turning their heads over to see how guild leader Liao was doing. The latter was still standing before the first patient with a deep frown. He had finished asking the patient for more details regarding his condition and was just about to move on to reading the patient's pulse. He read the pulse for quite a while before finally picking up a piece of paper and writing down the corresponding illness and treatment method. After he was done, he heaved a sigh of relief before turning toward his second patient. It was at that moment that he realized Zhongxian had come to a halt, so he urged with a frown, "Don't waste time. If our results are the same, the determining factor will be the time taken." He had been so preoccupied with diagnosing his patient earlier that he had not noticed the movements of the young man. Right after saying those words, he was just about to turn his focus to the second patient when he noticed all the physicians in the room looking at him with speechless faces. "What's wrong?" Guild leader Liao asked. Guild leader Liao, apothecary Zhong has already finished diagnosing and writing down all of the treatment methods. You might be the one who needs to hurry up, Vice Guild leader Wang replied awkwardly. Chapter 2176 Crushing Victory. He has finished writing down the treatment methods? Guild leader Liao was startled. He was barely done with the first patient, but his opponent was already done devising the treatment methods for all 10 of them. Guild leader Liao shook his head as his opinion of the young man fell a little further. Diagnosing a patient was not just about acquiring information. It was about piecing all the details together, be it the patient's age, strength, health history, or drug allergies, and creating a complete picture out of them. If one neglected even one of these factors, it could cause the situation to run out of control, thus placing the patient's life at risk. In his view, it was utterly ridiculous for someone to formulate a treatment without going through the 4 key steps of diagnosis. It was such arrogance that would eventually cost a patient's life. Sighing deeply, Guild leader Liao made a mental note in his mind to talk to the young man about this later before moving on to his next patient. All in all, it took Guild leader Liao 2 hours in order to finish diagnosing all 10 of the patients and devising their treatment methods. A little exhausted, he rubbed his glabella before turning in the papers with his answers. Let's check the results. With the answers of both participants in hand, Vice Guild leader Wang took the first paper from Guild leader Liao's stack and flipped it over. Everyone else in the room craned their necks over to see what was written on it, likely to be ephialtes bane symptom. This was the first conclusion that he came to after observing the first patient. Vice Guild leader Wang moved on to flip the second and third pieces, which reflected his diagnoses from the scent and inquiry, and the answer was the same. However, on the fourth piece of paper, which he wrote after feeling the patient's pulse, he overthrew his previous diagnosis, writing, not ephialtes bane symptom but night terror affliction. Treatment method. The ephialtes bane symptom was a symptom that tortured one's spirit. The patient would suffer from constant nightmares during their sleep, as if they were haunted by a devil. Their spirit would continue to wither as time went by, causing their great distress. In truth, it was just the side effect from a deficiency in a cultivator's spirit resulting from the damage caused by one's cultivation going berserk. As long as the cultivator cultivated their spirit and avoided putting stress on themselves, the symptom would eventually disappear. This symptom was almost identical to what a patient plagued by the night terror affliction would face. The only difference was that the former would only appear during any types of sleep and was not lethal, whereas the latter would only occur during deep sleep, and once the symptoms struck, there was a chance that the cultivator would never wake up again. Through just observation, scent, and inquiry, the information one would receive from patients suffering from those 2 diseases would be nearly identical. Unless one felt the pulse and sensed the differences in the fluctuation of energy, it would be impossible to discern the 2. A perfect answer. Vice Guild leader Wang nodded. In the diagnosis procedure, the first step, observation, would only suffice for a preliminary assessment. It did not provide enough information for one to fully ascertain the illness. For most physicians, it was only at the 4th step that they were able to eliminate other possibilities and decide on one. Guild leader Liao used this method to determine the cause of the illness and identify the root factor that he had to resolve. Taking the sheet of paper detailing the treatment method, Vice Guild leader Wang walked up to the first patient and placed it in his hand. Wang. The next moment, as if having eaten medicine, the complexion and spirit of the projected patient began to recover gradually. There was only one scenario in which such a situation would happen: the medicine was effective. Guild leader Liao stroked his beard in satisfaction. It had been many years since he had participated in a physician tournament, but it seemed like he had not grown rusty yet. He had treated the first patient impeccably. With this, he turned to Zhongxian. He wanted to see what kind of answers the young man could come up with in less than 10 minutes. With a smile, Zhongxian passed over the treatment method he had jotted down. Vice Guild leader Wang took the piece of paper, but upon seeing the content, he frowned. The crowd also glanced over, only to frown in bewilderment. There isn't any illness jotted down here. Did he fail to diagnose anything from the patient? But why would he write down a treatment method if he failed to diagnose anything from the patient? I have no idea. On the paper was a list of medicinal herbs, but there was nothing that indicated what kind of illness the first patient was suffering from. Furthermore, it seems like the prescription he wrote down is a little different from that of guild leader Liao. A little different. They are two completely different sets of herbs, but guild leader Liao's prescription is correct, right? Given that Apothecary Zhong's prescription is entirely different, doesn't that mean that he has already failed? At this point, everyone in the room had already come to a conclusion about Zhong Xian. The young man was really just an apothecary. He knew nothing about diagnosing and treating a patient at all. It was one thing for him to fail to diagnose a patient's condition accurately, but he even boldly came up with an incorrect prescription. It was fortunate that it was just a projected patient. If it had been a real patient, the consequences would have been dire. Is there even a need to continue this? Vice Guild leader Wang remarked in disappointment. In his opinion, Zhong Xian was no physician at all. It was pointless to continue the physician tournament like that. Are you suggesting that I have already lost without even testing my treatment method? Zhong Xian asked with a frown. Isn't it already obvious from this? Why don't you try placing my treatment method on the projected patient and see what happens? You are only humiliating yourself at this rate, but since you insist. Vice Guild leader muttered in exasperation as he walked up to the projected patient and took away Guild leader Liao's treatment method. As soon as the paper left the projected patient's hand, the latter immediately reverted to his sickly state. Vice Guild leader Wang then placed Zhong Xian's treatment method in the projected patient's hand. Wang. As soon as the projected patient came into contact with the paper, his sickly yellowish face immediately turned pale. Just as everyone thought that the patient was going to pass away from the wrong prescription, a minor explosion suddenly sounded, and the aura of the projected patient abruptly surged. It took a while before the surge finally came to a halt, and the fluctuations in energy calmed down. Taking another look at the projected patient, the physicians in the room realized that not only did the patient manage to recover from his illness, his complexion also looked redder from before. In fact, he seemed to have grown stronger. Did he make a breakthrough in his soul cultivation? Hang on a moment. Are you saying that Apothecary Zhong's prescription has not only cured the patient but even helped him make a breakthrough? Silence. Even Guild leader Liao's eyes had widened in shock. His treatment had only alleviated the patient's condition. On the other hand, the young man before him had not only cured the patient from the root cause, he had even turned this crisis into an opportunity to make a breakthrough. In other words, the young man's proposed treatment method was not just on the level of perfect. It had surpassed perfect to reach an even higher level. That's not all. The medicinal herbs in Apothecary Zhong's prescription are quite common. They can be found in most dispensaries in town, and they aren't too expensive. Ao Hua pointed out excitedly. On the way there, he had received strict instructions from Zhong Xian not to address him as ancestor but Apothecary Zhong. Clearly, the young man did not want to expose his identity as a pure-blooded dragon, or rather, he did not wish for the Sky of Cloud Dragon to investigate his affairs. Indeed, the crowd widened their eyes in astonishment upon noticing that fact. Realizing that this could be revolutionary, their eyes reddened in agitation. With the medicinal herbs in the prescription being inexpensive, it meant that they could easily apply this treatment to other patients facing the same affliction. In other words, the treatment was easily replicable. Such a prescription could potentially be used to save many lives in the future. What was the use of a prescription if the ingredients could not be obtained or were unaffordable? This was a very practical problem that most physicians faced while treating their patients. There were some physicians who were kind enough to pay on their patients' behalf, but that was clearly not sustainable. Physicians had to earn a livelihood as well, and it was perfectly normal for them to expect compensation for their hard work. It was ridiculous to expect them to pay on a patient's behalf. They were not saints. After a long while, guild leader Liao finally recovered from his shock, and he asked hoarsely, "How is it that your prescription is able to accomplish so much?" To be frank, he is not suffering from the Ephialtes bane symptom nor the night terror affliction. Instead, it's a poison that causes him to be susceptible to hallucinations. Zhong Xian replied. In the strictest sense, it can't be considered an illness, so I refrained from writing it down. He is poisoned. Guild leader Liao's eyes dilated in disbelief. But those are clearly the symptoms of the night terror affliction. Having diagnosed the patient carefully, he was certain that his judgment was not wrong. Furthermore, the patient had also recovered after consuming his medicine. So, how could it be a poison? The patient does have symptoms of the night terror affliction. However, the night terror affliction only damages one's soul, making one feel constantly exhausted and lethargic. It doesn't have much of an effect on one's physical body. However, the patient's body showed clear signs of deficiency, such that even his skin has turned yellowish. Like a tree in autumn, he looked as if he was going to hit the limit of his lifespan at any moment. From this observation, it's clear that there are some issues regarding the vitality of his body as well. The body of a celestial god is strong and resilient, making it highly resistant to most physical anomalies. Given so, it seems a little hard to imagine that a mere night terror affliction would leave the patient's body in such a state. So, I wondered if the patient had been poisoned. Through my careful observation, I realized that the patient is actually from the sky of deathlessness Wangyu Mountain, which is known to be the habitat where night terror cobras thrive in. So, I deduced that the patient might have encountered a night terror cobra there and ended up getting bitten, resulting in his current state. While most prescriptions dealing with the night terror affliction alleviate the effects caused by the venom of the night terror cobra, they are unable to neutralize the venom itself. Short term, the patient will appear to have been cured. However, the venom will act up once every 2 years, and on the 5th time that the condition relapses, the venom will have already circulated throughout the patient's body. By then, there'll be nothing that can be done to save the patient anymore. The crowd in the surroundings blinked blankly. They were having trouble trying to process what they had just heard. This. Are you sure you are a physician and not a prophet? The person in the projection has been dead for innumerable years, and his corpse has already been reduced to dust. How in the world did you manage to tell that he is from the sky of deathlessness Mountain Wangyu? From what I remember, you only looked at the patient and didn't ask any questions, right? Guild leader Liao quickly turned to the projected patient and asked, "Where do you live?" As the environment where a cultivator lived could potentially reveal the cause of the illness, the projected patients were allowed to answer this question. "Sky of deathlessness, Mountain Wangyu," the projected patient replied. This. Hearing the response, everyone staggered a little from shock. Perhaps calling it shock was an understatement. Things were starting to develop in a creepy direction. With just a single look, the young man had not only been able to diagnose the patients accurately but also figured out where the patients were from. It was almost as if the young man was born with an innate talent to become a stalker. Terrifying. The sky of deathlessness is located at the south of the firmament, and the climate is hot and humid. Through his clothes, it's possible to deduce as much. Zhong Xian could see through the doubts the physicians had in mind, so he explained his thought process to them. Hearing those words, the crowd quickly turned their gazes over, and indeed, the patient was wearing light, cooling clothes. Nourished by the moist atmosphere, southerners tended to have paler and suppler skin. In comparison, northerners tend to have drier and rougher skin. It's possible to discern the region that one originates from through such physical traits, Zhong Xian said. That is not the conclusive evidence though. Regardless of whether he was afflicted with the night terror affliction or venom, his soul would have been injured. However, the condition of the injury would have been different. If it was the former, it would have been an overall deterioration of his soul. If it was the latter, his injuries would have been more severe at the location where the poison first seeped in. Through careful observation, I was able to sense that the deterioration of his soul was uneven, and that proved that he had been poisoned. I see. The crowd nodded in realization as they looked at the young man in awe and admiration. They had thought that the latter was an inept physician wannabe, but who could have known that he was actually a grandmaster way beyond their league? Let's continue. Vice Guild Leader Wang continued to verify the remaining 9 patients. Guild Leader Liao's treatment methods were all correct, but they paled far in comparison to what Zhong Xian had come up with. All of the prescriptions that Zhong Xian suggested allowed the patient to achieve some sort of breakthrough after they were cured, making it clear which method was superior. Of the 10 patients, all his treatment methods were beyond perfect. "I have lost," guild leader Liao remarked with a bitter smile. "It was a great battle. I have learned a lot from it." Chapter 2177 Deducing a Sword. RT Guild leader Liao was initially certain that Zhongxian's medical skills would be way beneath his, but at this moment, he realized that he was nothing more than a firefly standing before the radiant sun. Their skills were not even in the same league. "Does this mean that I have earned the right to use the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation now?" Zhongxian asked. "Of course. There are still some procedures that must be cleared. I'll have to report this matter upward first. However, you should be able to receive your token by this afternoon at the latest," guild leader Liao said. Even though Zhongxian had already met the criteria, there was still a need to report this matter to the other skies and have a token forged specifically for him before he could use the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation. "I understand." He had already been in this city for quite a few days. He did not mind waiting for another half a day. So, he bade farewell and left the residence together with Qi Ling'er. Shortly after they left, the room fell silent. Guild leader Liao could not help but ask, "Ao Hua, did he really manage to defeat you with the prowess of his physical body?" "Yes, that's indeed what happened," Ao Hua replied. "The resilience of his physical body surpasses yours, his skills in pill forging have won Fu Junction's praise, and his mastery in the way of medicine has reached an unfathomable level that even I am unable to see through. The world sure has many amazing individuals." Guild leader Liao remarked deeply. He had thought that he would be able to ravage Drifting Spectre Royal City's Physician Guild and catapult the reputation of Cloud Dragon Royal City's Physician Guild to new heights. Yet, who could have known that he would suffer such a tragic defeat before he could even encounter the lot from Drifting Spectre Royal City's Physician Guild? If even he was not a match for Zhongxian, it was likely to be even more so for the rest. "Let's go back," guild leader Liao instructed with a deep sigh of helplessness. "What about the physician tournament with Drifting Spectre Royal City's Physician Guild? As long as Physician Zhong is a citizen of the sky of Drifting Spectre, even if we defeat Drifting Spectre Royal City's Physician Guild, we still won't be able to establish our dominance over them. There's no point in going ahead with it," guild leader Liao replied. "As long as Zhongxian existed, they would never be able to claim that their physicians were superior to those of the sky of Drifting Spectres. Their goal in going there was to buff up their reputation, but since it was not going to work out, there was no point in it anymore. It would just be a waste of effort and time." "All right then." Understanding where guild leader Liao was coming from, the other physicians nodded in agreement. "In Drifting Spectre Royal City's Physician Guild. Congratulations, Physician Zhao Chong." After a few rounds of selections, the candidate that was chosen to represent them was Physician Zhao Chong. While his reputation was not as sound as the other candidates, there was no questioning that his medical skills were amazing. The set of medical maneuvers he performed during the selection phase had really astounded the crowd. Of course, Physician Zhao Chong is the real deal. He isn't someone whom the likes of an apothecary can compete with. "Are you referring to Zhongxian?" "Hee. I admit that he's indeed a prodigy when it comes to pill forging, but medicine? He still has a long way to go. Each occupation has its own challenges to surmount. It's lucky that we turned him away, or else I would have cringed each time he made a mistake." Seeing Zhao Chong's amazing performance, the crowd could not help but think of the conceited young man from earlier, and they could not help but burst into laughter. So what if the young man was good at forging pills? Physicians did not compete on the grounds of pill forging. If they had really allowed an apothecary to represent them, others would mock their physician guild for being so desperate as to send even those of the other occupations forward. At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly rushed into the room. "What's wrong?" Guild leader Sun Xian asked with a frown. "The physicians of the sky of Cloud Dragon have left." "They've left? What do you mean by that? Are they going to forfeit the challenge?" Guild leader Sun Xian was taken aback. The opponent had arrived with the intention of using them as stepping stones, so why were they backing out before the battle even began? They said that since their skills are lacking, it's meaningless to proceed with the challenge. So, they decided to leave. the middle-aged man exclaimed. Their skills are lacking. What do they mean by that? Everyone was stunned. They had not faced each other yet. Why would the opponent suddenly come to such a conclusion? According to what I heard, it seems like a physician from our Sky of Drifting Spectre went to their accommodation and defeated guild leader Liao with ease. They were awed by the proficiency he displayed in the way of medicine, so they decided to admit defeat. The middle-aged man revealed what he had heard thus far. Someone challenged guild leader Liao and won against him? Are you serious? Guild leader Liao's medical skills are known to be at the forefront of the Nine Skies. Indeed. He's the person who I look up to the most, you know. Wait a moment. Who defeated guild leader Liao? Everyone stared at one another blankly before a physician spoke up in bewilderment. All of the physicians registered in Royal City are here at the moment, and none of us have left here since a while ago. It doesn't make sense. Are we missing someone here? I was confused as well, so I asked them about it earlier, and it seems like the physician's name is Zhong Xian, the middle-aged man exclaimed. Zhong Xian? The person whom we just drove away. Apothecary Zhong? Are you sure? That's a physician who was able to defeat the great guild leader Liao. I find it hard to believe that Apothecary Zhong wields such capability. Could you have heard wrong somehow? The crowd was dumbstruck. Recalling how they had driven the young man out earlier, their faces turned so red that it looked as if someone had given them a few firm slaps. It was not too long ago that they mocked the apothecary for wanting to participate in their selections, but who would have thought that the apothecary was even more skilled than the highly respected guild leader Liao? Guild leader Sun Xian's lips twitched in shock. At this moment, he wanted to just burrow his way into the ground so that he would not have to feel so awkward and embarrassed. Oblivious to the mental breakdown that Drifting Spectre Royal City's Physician Guild was going through at the moment, Zhong Xian looked at the token on the table before him before raising his head to ask, is this the token to use the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation? Just a few minutes prior, guild leader Liao had arrived personally to pass the token to him. The token was roughly the size of an infant's fist, and there were some inscriptions carved on it. Vaguely, one could feel a powerful will lingering within the token, inducing deference in the depths of one's soul. This is a token carved personally by a god monarch. It has the power to withstand the spatial turbulence caused by the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation, Qi Ling'er explained as she looked at the token in envy. Even though she was a core member of the Qi clan and had great power in her grasp, she still was not qualified to possess such a token. This token would allow one to travel from one sky to another in a matter of seconds. As long as one had enough money, one could easily tour around the Nine Skies without any trouble. Zhong Xian nodded silently in response. He could also tell that the inscriptions on the token were imbued with extraordinary power that was even greater than what he had felt from conferred God King Qi Meng. All right. I'll leave you to continue handling the sales of the beauty pill and breakthrough pill. Remember, my aim is to create as much hype around the pills as possible. Other than that, I hope that you can also help look after my parents and Sun Qiong. If there's anything that they require for their cultivation, try to meet their demands, Zhong Xian instructed. As he would be venturing into the foreign sky of spirit origin, it was likely that he could encounter some danger there. So, he had chosen not to take his parents along with him. After the Xingmeng Sword Saints received the guidance from the experts of the Sword Hut, their comprehension of swordsmanship had become significantly deeper. This had a synergistic effect on their cultivation, allowing them to grow swiftly. On top of that, Zhong Xian was providing them with all the cultivation resources they needed. They were gobbling down the invaluable and much sought-after beauty pills and breakthrough pills as if they were cheap candy balls. Due to that, they had managed to raise their cultivation to low-tier celestial god. At this rate, it would not take them too long to reach high-tier celestial god. After making arrangements, Zhong Xian swiftly confirmed the location the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation before riding an aerial celestial beast over. As long as the Qi clan thought that he was a god monarch, they would surely do everything within their means to protect his parents and Sun Qiong, so they should be relatively safe in Drifting Spectre Royal City. But their safety would no longer be guaranteed once they ventured beyond the city walls. The lucrative market created by the arrival of the breakthrough pill and beauty pill had stirred the greed in the hearts of many powers. Most of these powers did not dare make a move in drifting Spectre Royal City out of fear of the Qi clan, but once they left the protection of the Qi clan, there was no doubt that those powers would make use of the opportunity to strike. In fact, he felt that his journey to the Great Displacement teleportation formation and teleporting straight over to the sky of spirit origin might not be as smooth as he would like. Sitting on the aerial celestial beast, Zhongxian closed his eyes and began conditioning his current state. As a symbol of neutrality, the Great Displacement teleportation formation was not located within Royal City but at the top of a mountain several hundred li away. So, if one wanted to use the teleportation formation, one had to leave Royal City. This meant that there was a good chance that Zhongxian could be assaulted by another person while traveling to the teleportation formation. As the person who knew the pill formulas of the breakthrough pill and beauty pill, there were probably many who viewed him as a fountain of wealth. Anyone who could capture him would gain the key to endless fortune. There are still 15 minutes before I finally leave the city, Zhongxian thought. I guess I should use this time to work on my celestial god realm sword art. It had not been too long since he became a celestial god, and all this while, he had been too preoccupied with other matters and ended up neglecting his sword art. Since he had some time on hand, it would be good for him to work on it. He noticed that in order to grasp the sword art of the pathos of heaven, he would have to immerse himself in the environment of the firmament. If he channeled his consciousness into the isolated great codex of spring and autumn, even though he would be able to enjoy the benefits of a time acceleration of 10,000 times, it would not help him in his comprehension at all. The first level of the pathos of heaven is bond of allegiance, and the sword art is a heart of intertwined threads. The second level of the pathos of heaven is camaraderie of brothers, and the sword art is unyielding loyalty. The third level is ties of teacher and student. The cultivation techniques and sword arts that Zhongxian had comprehended from the pathos of heaven revolved in his mind, drifting quietly. Like a painting, they slowly unfurled to reveal a grand picture that depicted his journey thus far. Some of the times were exciting, and some of the times were sweet. Some of the times were horrifying, and some of the times were heart-wrenching. It was a picture filled with all sorts of flavors and sentiments, and these were what made him what he was. Passion and affection, these were emotions. Hatred and abhorrence, these were also emotions. Happiness and pain, these were emotions, too. There were no sentient beings in the world that could escape their emotions, and if the world was devoid of sentience, the heavens would have no reason to exist. It was as if emotions were the bane of the heavens. They hindered the rationality of the heavens, but they were a natural part of the world as well. Perhaps emotions could be viewed as an even higher force. The heavens could be destroyed, but emotions would continue to exist as long as life persisted. A teacher and a student were two people who would be otherwise strangers if not for the bond of mentorship. This bond signified the continuation of one's knowledge, wisdom, and values, binding the two people tightly together. It appeared to be a transient relationship bound by nothing more than societal values, but it could become strong enough to rival the bond of kinship. I see. Zhongxian's heart quivered as an emotion surged. Just as he was about to execute the sword art, he felt goosebumps rising all over his body. Without any hesitation, he leaped off his aerial celestial beast. Pang! The next instant, the aerial celestial beast that he had been riding on suddenly burst apart, and Zhongxian was left plummeting from the sky. Chapter 2178 Fighting a God King 1:2178 Fighting a God King 1. An assault. Lowering his head, Zhongxian saw a lush forest beneath him. The massive buildings of drifting Spectre Royal City were no more than 5 meters behind him. In other words, as soon as he left Royal City, there was already someone who could not hold himself back from making a move on him. He had not told anyone about his intention to use the Great Displacement teleportation formation today except for Sun Qiong, Qi Ling'er, and his parents. Yet, they were still able to lay an ambush for him there in advance. It seemed like someone had been keeping tabs on his movements. He had underestimated the temptation of the breakthrough pill and the beauty pill. The ground was moving toward Zhongxian at an accelerating pace. It would not be long before he finally crashed into the ground. However, what he really had to be wary of were the ones above him. There were 6 aerial celestial beasts charging toward him from above. Each beast had a black-robed person standing above them with a spear in hand. One of them had killed his celestial aerial beast. In the firmament, only god-kings possessed the ability to fly. Even though Zhongxian's cultivation had already reached high-tier celestial god, it was still impossible for him to maneuver in the sky without the help of an aerial beast. It seems like I'll have to learn how to fly before I perfect my sword art, Zhongxian thought. With his current strength and his experiences from the Master-Teacher continent and the Azure, it should not be too difficult for him to figure out how to fly. It was just that it had not been long since his cultivation reached high-tier celestial god, and there had been no time for him to spend on it. Given his current plight, if he did not learn how to fly within the next few seconds, even though he would not lose his life from falling from such a high altitude, he would have still lost half of his fighting prowess as a result of that. It would be difficult for him to deal with the encirclement of enemies in a weakened state. Boom! The 6 people in the sky brandished their spears and pierced them right toward Zhongxian, causing a gust of cold air to be blasted in his direction. They were all high-tier celestial gods. Furthermore, they had chosen to use their full strength right from the start. With the resilience of Zhongxian's body, he was not too bothered by the assault of the 6. Not even the claw swipe of a pure-blooded dragon could make him bleed, so what could the spear thrust of those 6 possibly do? The only issue was that if he faced the spear thrusts directly, the impact of the collision would further accelerate the speed of his fall. If so, the fall might prove dangerous, even for him. While his physical body was much tougher than before, he did not want to gamble on something that he was not certain about, especially not in the face of his enemies. I guess I have no choice. I can only do this. As the spears came closer and closer to him, Zhongxian closed his eyes. Question marks popped out on the heads of the charging 6. Was their target giving up just like that? Why don't you at least try to struggle a little? Do you know how many strategies we have prepared beforehand to deal with you? It will be awkward if we manage to take you down so easily after spending long hours coming up with countless countermeasures against you. At that moment, Zhongxian's consciousness was already immersed in the great codex of spring and autumn. The enemies were swiftly approaching him, but from the looks of it, there were still 2 more seconds before he reached the ground. In the great codex of spring and autumn's terms, that would be 20,000 seconds or 5.5 hours. That was more than enough for him to figure out a flying technique so that he could stand his ground even in an aerial battle. The reason he had such confidence was because he had cultivated a technique called the Red Dust Heaven Ascending Steps back on the Master-Teacher continent. That technique had allowed him to fly back when his cultivation was still in the transcendent mortal realm. Although his environment was a little different from before, he should still be able to get the Red Dust Heaven Ascending Steps working as long as he made some adjustments to the technique. With such a thought in mind, he quickly took out the Red Dust Heaven Ascending Steps from the shelves of the Library of Heaven's Path and fused it together with the other books he had collected in the firmament. Compile. A new book was created. With a tap of his finger, the knowledge contained within the newly compiled book flowed into his head. It seems like it's impossible to directly convert the techniques from the Master-Teacher continent over to the firmament. He had thought that he would be able to compile a Heaven's Path technique through compiling the Red Dust Heaven Ascending Steps together with the books that he had gathered in the firmament, but what he received was mostly gibberish. As the heavens of the 2 worlds differed, the meridian network and constitutions of the cultivators were vastly different from one another. As such, he could no longer practice the Red Dust Heaven Ascending Steps as it was. He had to manually modify it to fit his own constitution before cultivating it. So, he began reviewed the Red Dust Heaven Ascending Steps and making modifications to it bit by bit. It took some time before he was finally done with his work. The Red Dust Heaven Ascending Steps required the cultivator to circulate his zhenqi in a certain manner to offset the pull of gravity. The principles behind it were not that tough to understand, but pulling it off was another matter. It was the kind of technique that a cultivator would either have to perform impeccably, or it would fail. As such, even if a new practitioner had fully grasped the concepts behind the technique, It would probably still take quite a few tries before they could start maneuvering themselves around the sky. Fortunately for Zhongxian, he had used the technique before. As such, he should be able to use it adept right away. Driving his zhengqi around his body, he could feel himself swiftly gaining control over his surroundings. At this moment, he was already less than 20 meters away from the ground, and the spears were right before him. A sharp glint flashed through his eyes as he verbalized 2 powerful notes from his mouth. Mu. Mao. 8 notes of heavenly dragon. While they were less effective on beasts that were not from the dragon tribe, similar to the ferocious roar of a lion, it could still shake their spirits and reduce their fighting will. He was a little too close to the surface for comfort. He could not afford to make any mistakes now. After disorientating the 6 celestial beasts to mess up the assault of the 6 black-robed individuals momentarily, Zhongxian swiftly executed the red dust heaven ascending steps to break his fall. By now, the speed of his fall was already too great for him to stop entirely, so he still ended up landing on the ground with a loud explosion, the impact creating a large crater with a 10-meter radius around him. Even so, he managed to overcome the crisis with minimal injuries. As soon as he landed on the floor, he immediately leaped upward and maneuvered past the 6 aerial celestial beasts to fly in the air. Meanwhile, the 6 aerial celestial beasts, together with their riders, continued to fall with increasing velocity. They were not able to stop earlier due to the effects of the 8 notes of heavenly dragon momentarily befuddling their senses. By the time they snapped out of it, the ground was only a mere meter away from them. Peng! 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 6 resounding explosions ensued as the 6 celestial beasts and their 6 riders charged right into the ground one after another, causing massive craters that spanned several hundred meters in their wake. Zhongxian had been flying at an altitude of more than 2,000 meters earlier, and under the effects of gravity, the speed that he was moving at was already scary enough. On the other hand, those 6 assailants were dashing right toward him in order to catch up with him. As one could expect, the fall had nearly cost them their lives. This was especially so for the 6 celestial beasts, who bore the brunt of the impact. Their organs had ruptured. If they were not treated in time, they might pass away. Looking at the mess beneath him, Zhongxian snorted coldly. He had no sympathy for those who went after him in order to fulfill their greed. With a flick of his finger, he sent 6 surges of sword qi toward the 6 assailants below. Puha! The sword qi passed through their glabelli without any resistance. Before they could even say a word, they had already breathed their last breath. After killing them, Zhongxian swiftly collected their storage rings and spears with a wave of his hand. Those spears were high-tier celestial god artifacts, so they were still rather useful to him. As for the storage rings, there was quite a bit of money inside, but other than that, there was nothing worthy of note. After looting everything of value, Zhongxian walked up to one of the aerial celestial beasts. He was intending to heal it to continue on his way, but all of a sudden, his temples started pulsating. It was the feeling of danger encroaching on him. Alarmed, he immediately darted to the side. Voila! The next instant, a surge of sword qi sliced through the spot where he had been standing a moment ago, creating a gorge several hundred meters long. Even the tough bedrock beneath was sliced in two so easily as if it was a blob of tofu. Despite his powerful body, he would have sustained severe injuries if he had taken that attack head-on. With a grim look on his face, Zhongxian turned to look in the direction where the attack came from. There, he saw a middle-aged man making his way toward him one step at a time from the sky. Flight. He's a god king. Zhongxian clenched his fists tightly together. It seemed like the true mastermind who wanted his pill formulas had finally made an appearance. To think that a god king would actually be behind this. Every single god king was highly respected in the firmament, but this one was so eager to claim his possessions that he made a move on him as soon as he was out of the protection of Royal City. I'm surprised. You are able to fly despite not being a god king, and you were able to kill 6 of my strongest subordinates without a hitch. I should have expected as much of the person behind the beauty pill and the breakthrough pill. I must say that this is quite an eye-opener for me, the middle-aged man said as he stopped around 30 meters away from Zhongxian. He had thought that he would be able to capture a mere apothecary without having to make a move himself, But the target turned out to be more formidable than expected. Before he knew it, all his subordinates had passed away. Looking at the middle-aged man coldly, Zhongxian asked, "Who are you, and what do you want? Are you not afraid of offending the Qi clan?" According to what Qi Linger said, it seemed like the Qi clan had already made it known that they were protecting him. Yet, this God King still dared to make a move on him. Was he not afraid of the wrath of the Qi clan? The Qi clan? Ha ha ha, of course I am afraid of them. How could I not be afraid of them? Someone as intelligent as you should have already guessed my intentions. I don't wish to make an enemy out of the Qi clan, so as long as you hand over the pill formulas, I am willing to let you go, the middle-aged man said with a smile. Hearing those words, Zhongxian frowned. Those words did not tally at all. The God King should have known that he would definitely face the wrath of the Qi clan if he get out of there alive, which meant that. He took a swift glance around him, and his complexion immediately darkened. There were special formations set up around the forest in order to conceal any traces of battle. He had been so preoccupied with cultivating earlier that he failed to realize that his aerial celestial beast had led him right into this formation. The enemy might have even used some sort of method to lure his aerial celestial beast into this formation. Are the pill formulas all you want? Zhongxian asked. Indeed. If you die here, the Qi clan will surely scour the entire world just to hunt me down. I don't want that to happen, you see, the middle-aged man said. However, since I've made a move, I have no intention of leaving here empty-handed. You might be thinking that you are powerful enough to give me the slip, but I can tell you frankly that your strength is still far beneath the level of God Kings like me. And what if I refuse? Zhongxian said. You wouldn't want to do that. I am quite a short-tempered person myself. If you make me angry, I might accidentally hurt you, the middle-aged man replied as his lips curled up sinisterly. The middle-aged man would likely kill him regardless of whether he brought out the pill formulas or not. He could not possibly risk allowing the Qi clan to get on his trail, or else he would be placing himself in grave danger. Zhongxian looked at the middle-aged man in the eye and asked, "So, you are determined to achieve your goal no matter what happens? You seem to be awfully confident in your strength." Chapter 2179 Fighting a God King 2:2179 Fighting a God King 2. You plan on fighting against me? The face of the middle-aged man turned livid. He drew his sword, causing a metallic reverberation reminiscent of a dragon's roar to echo in the air. The next moment, the middle-aged man suddenly appeared right before Zhongxian. His sword tore through the air to strike right down on Zhongxian's waist. As a God King, his cultivation was strong enough to put him in the highest echelon of the firmament. His offense did not appear to be as imposing as the attacks from a celestial god, but that was only because his strength was fully channeled into harming his enemy. There was not the slightest bit of energy wasted as heat or sound. Furthermore, the world seemed to sway along with his movements, reinforcing the might of his attack. Humph! Seeing how the middle-aged man made a move on him as soon as negotiations broke down, Zhongxian knew that the other party had other means to extract the pill formulas from him even after he was dead. After all, the concept of soul search and similar techniques existed on the firmament as well. It was clear that there was nothing he could say that would make the middle-aged man hold back on him. Since words would make no difference at this point, Zhongxian immediately retreated using the red dust heaven ascending steps. However, even though the movement technique allowed him to fly, the speed at which he could move was drastically beneath that of a God King. Zhongxian could barely retreat a dozen steps before another slash was right before him. In that moment, Zhongxian opened his arms. As he drove his zhongqi to its limits, he took out the 6 spears that he had collected from the 6 assailants earlier and directed them toward the middle-aged man. Each of these spears was infused with his spear quintessence, granting them superior might. Furthermore, they were positioned in a manner that allowed them to synergize their powers through a collaborative formation. You do have some means. The middle-aged man did not expect Zhongxian to be such a skilled spear practitioner. With a cold harumph, he redirected his sword away from Zhongxian to deal with the spear formation instead. Peng! 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 With a single strike, the 6 spears were broken at their intersection by a sword, causing the formation to collapse. The difference in the tier of the weapons and their cultivation made the result of this collision a foregone conclusion. You would have been a truly terrifying adversary if you had been able to become a god king. It's a pity that such a day will never come, the middle-aged man remarked as he swung his sword once more. His movements were not too large, but the despairingly powerful pressure produced by the slash made no question of the might of the attack. Even with the pathos of heaven, it was still difficult for Zhongxian to bridge the humongous gap that existed between a god king and a celestial god. If not for that, god kings would not have been so revered in the world. I think that I'm already plenty terrifying as an adversary for you as I am right now though, Zhongxian retorted nonchalantly. He admitted that his strength was indeed lacking compared to the middle-aged man, but the latter was just a mere god king. A good smash from a golden page would probably be enough to grind even a conferred god king down to smithereens, let alone a god king. The only reason the middle-aged man was still alive was because he did not want to waste his treasure on the likes of him. Conceited, aren't you? The middle-aged man scoffed as he brandished his sword furiously. In an instant, the entire sky was covered with sword chi, plunging the surroundings into darkness. This time around, instead of dodging, Zhongxian dashed forward. He gathered his sword chi at the tip of his finger, producing a spark of light amid the darkness. It felt incomparably insignificant compared to the barrage of sword chi that was swarming the surroundings, yet there seemed to be some compelling power to it that one simply could not ignore. It was a very weird feeling. Despite being a god king, the middle-aged man could not help but feel a little apprehensive at the congregation of sword chi at the tip of Zhongxian's finger. It made him feel like he was wrapped in layers of silk, leaving him unable to run. Voila! The sword chi covering the sky suddenly surged into the congregation of sword chi at the tip of Zhongxian's finger, as if it was being devoured. At the same time, the aura of the congregation of sword chi surged to a terrifying extent. What is that sword art? The middle-aged man asked with eyes widened in shock. The sword art was already so powerful even though the young man was only using his finger. If the young man had a sword in his hand, would the sword art have been even more powerful? He had never seen such a ridiculously powerful sword art before. Even god kings would have some difficulties trying to execute such a powerful move. Feeling goosebumps rising all over his body, the god king immediately raised his sword in preparation to deal with whatever was coming. At the very same time, the young man before him muttered, "Only on demise will a silkworm run out of thread, only as ashes will the tears of a candle dry up." The third level of the pathos of heaven's sword art had finally been created. Prior to the assault, he had figured out what kind of sword art he wanted to create, and in this moment of danger, he had managed to connect with his emotions to pull it off. A day as a teacher, a lifetime as a father. A teacher had to have the same sternness that a parent would have when educating their students, or perhaps even more than that. A teacher should also be a friend. They should communicate with their students with care and concern so as to understand their circumstances and guide them based on their nature. A teacher, as though a nanny, would also worry about everything relating to their students, taking everything about them into consideration regardless of how large or small they were. The relationship between a teacher and a student was complex, and it could not be summarized with just a few words. This was a bond that could be so powerful and lasting that it could linger till death. Only on demise will a silkworm run out of thread, only as ashes will the tears of a candle dry up. This sword art was built upon the deepest emotions in his heart, and like a black hole, it swallowed the middle-aged man whole. Even as a god king, he was unable to stand against the prowess of the sword art. Before he knew it, he was struck square in the chest. A gaping laceration appeared right across his chest. "You!" The middle-aged man did not think that he would be injured in a fight against a high-tier celestial god, and he could no longer keep his composure. With a furious roar, he was just about to toss everything aside to slay the young man when he felt a chill behind him. Acting solely on his instincts, he channeled his energy to his back to fortify his body. Pada! With a resounding sonic boom, a powerful force rippled across his back as his body catapulted forward before tumbling to the ground. The middle-aged man adept leaped to his feet before turning around, only to see another figure that was identical to the young man he was facing. "This is a clone." The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes. It was a clone that shared the same strength as the main body. Where in the world did that fellow manage to find something like that? Attack! Paying no heed to the middle-aged man's shock, Zhongxian charged forward as he flicked sword qi from his finger. At the same time, the clone also dashed forward. Due to the unique nature of the Nine Hearts Lotus, the clone did not have to temper its physical body at all. As long as it had an ample amount of God Essence Pill, it was able to strengthen its body and raise its cultivation sufficiently. If not for the pathos of heaven, even Zhongxian would not have been a match for it. The coordination of the two of them was terrifying. Even with his strength as a god king, the middle-aged man found himself under a lot of stress. Usually, god kings should have been able to suppress high-tier celestial gods easily with just a single finger, but he found himself struggling to cope against the two opponents before him. This made him feel extremely stifled. He had never felt so indignant fighting with someone who was not a god king. It seems like I was looking down on you. However, it doesn't make a difference. You won't be getting away alive. The middle-aged man released his full strength, and in that moment, it felt like the surrounding space had frozen in place. Zhongxian and his clone immediately felt great resistance to their movements, causing them to slow down significantly. Zhongxian's sword art was powerful, but he did not have an appropriate weapon to use it with. The clone boasted a powerful physical body, but his real cultivation was a little too low. As such, it was still hard for them to match up to a god king. Peng peng. Zhongxian and his clone were struck simultaneously, causing them to fly backward. Who? The clone's body wiggled a little, and its injuries vanished without a trace. At the same time, Zhongxian channeled his zhenqi toward his injuries, and they swiftly healed up as well. You! The middle-aged man was stunned. He was certain that he had dealt a near-fatal wound to Zhongxian and his clone in that earlier strike, but the two of them were able to heal up in the blink of an eye. Just what kind of freakish enemy did he just get himself tangled up with? Lowering his head, he saw that the gaping laceration across his chest was still dripping blood, and he immediately felt less well. With his constitution as a god king, he would usually be able to heal up from most wounds fast enough as long as he channeled his energy to it. However, he dared not lose his concentration in his fight against the other party, so his injuries only got more and more severe with time. His vigorous movements had caused the laceration to tear further, and a greater amount of blood was flowing out from it. He had thought that as long as he could wound the enemy, he should be able to catch a breather to heal his injuries. And he did manage to wound the enemy eventually, but how was he to know that the enemy could heal up in the blink of an eye? Furthermore, it felt like their auras had grown even more violent and powerful after healing up. Are the two of you the incarnation of the god of cockroaches? Just what in the world do I have to do in order to kill you? At this rate, the situation would only get more disadvantageous to him the more it dragged out. Let's come at him, Zhongxian said as he rushed forward with his clone once more. It was clear that their greatest trump card against the middle-aged man was the difference in their recovery ability. They could afford to attack recklessly, whereas the middle-aged man had to tread carefully. Peng peng peng. 3 minutes later, the middle-aged man's face had already turned ghastly pale from weakness. On the other hand, even though his opponent was in an unkempt state as well, there was not the slightest injury to be seen on them. They were still as vigorous as ever. The middle-aged man clutched his hair in frenzy. How am I supposed to win this battle? He should have been able to kill a high-tier celestial god easily enough, but before he knew it, the tables had already turned on him. He was the one who was going to be killed. Damn. Knowing that he was in a disadvantageous position, the god king immediately turned around and ran away. Even though he had concealed the area with a formation, it did not change the fact that they were in proximity to drifting Spectre Royal City. If he could not kill his opponent fast enough, he might draw the attention of the conferred god kings. You must be thinking that I am a pushover. I should make an example out of you so that others know better than to cross me. If he let his assailant get away so easily, he could be certain that he would face more ambushes in the future. So, Zhongxian stowed his clone away and chased the god king using the red dust heaven ascending steps. However, the speed of his flight was simply too slow. He could not catch up with the middle-aged man. Ha ha ha. I might be unable to kill you, But you aren't able to stop me from leaving. The middle-aged man turned around and harumphed. Just you wait. It'll be the date of your death the next time we meet. Right after saying those words, he turned around and bolted away. But before he could get far, he was forced to come to a halt. Ah! What is? Before he could finish his words, a massive beak appeared before him. Glub! Just like that, the middle-aged man was swallowed whole. Then, a small chick in front of Zhongxian. Burp! It released a resounding belch as it shook its bottom leisurely. Little chick, you're awake? Zhongxian asked in agitation. The little chick that had gone into hibernation after dying in the lucid lunar lake had awakened once more, and judging by the tremendous power within it, it had actually become a god king. Zhongxian had thought that he would be able to become a god king soon enough, but he was unable to gather the anima of yearning fast enough, causing his soul cultivation to lag behind. As a result, he was still some way off from making a breakthrough. In the end, this chick even beat him to it. A god king chick. Just the thought of it filled him with excitement. 1. This saying literally means, you might be my teacher for a day, but I'll view you as my father for a lifetime. Chapter 2180 Sky of Spirit Origin. After his initial delight, Zhongxian could not help but feel a little self-conscious. It had been a month since he arrived at the firmament, but he had only managed to cultivate up to high-tier celestial god thus far. He could not even match up to a chick. Just thinking about it made him feel so upset that he could hardly breathe. Was his talent really that bad? It seemed like he would have to spend more time on his cultivation in order to make up for his lack of talent then. He really needed to become a god king as soon as possible. He would not be able to lift his head up if he could not even match a chick in terms of cultivation. This little yellow chick had been with him ever since his time at the Sanctum of Sages on the Master-Teacher continent. They had been through the Kungsu domain and the Azure, and after so long, it was still ahead of him in terms of cultivation. If it had been anyone else, he would surely have felt suicidal. I just woke, burp, up. Little chick stretched its neck as it patted its round tummy with its wings. It suddenly looked at Zhongxian worriedly with its beady eyes and asked, "You won't blame me for eating that fellow, right?" It had been scolded many times by Zhongxian for eating things that it should not have. "It's fine. Feel free to eat it," Zhongxian said with a wave of his hand. "If it's not enough, you can eat the others who are coming after me too." If little chick had not awoken in time, there was a good chance that he would have used the golden page to subdue the god king. In a sense, it did save him from a great deal of potential trouble in the future. "Thanks, boss." Little chick grinned in delight. Then, its beak suddenly puffed up, and it spat out a sword. "This is the weapon that fellow was using. I have already erased the soul imprint on it, so you should be able to use it after you enchant and tame it." While swallowing the god king, it had also swallowed his weapon. Zhongxian picked up the sword and swiftly enchanted and tamed it. Once that was done, he looked at little chick and directed a nod of approval toward it. As expected of someone who had traveled through 3 worlds with him. At least it still had some conscience. As the sword was a god king artifact, if little chick had not removed the soul imprint and weapon spirit in it, he would not have been able to enchant or tame it. With such a powerful weapon in his arsenal, his fighting prowess immediately increased a great deal. With the 3 sword arts that he had comprehended, even if he encountered another god king, he should be able to put up a decent fight against the other party. Looking at the reverberating sword in his hand, Zhongxian raised it into the air and proudly declared, "From this day forth, you shall be called God King Sword." Woo! The reverberation abruptly halted. It seemed like the spirit within the sword had fallen into a daze. "I am a dignified god king artifact. Others have cool names such as Empty Spring, Dancing Swallow, Venom Dragon, Hidden Canary, Fish Guts, and the like, such that people know their class just by hearing their name. What the heck's with my god king sword? Can you be any more perfunctory than this? You don't like it?" Zhongxian stroked his lower jaw contemplatively. "Well, you were a gift from little chick. Why don't we go with Chicky Sword?" "Ayo!" The sword nearly fell to the ground in shock. It immediately zipped up its mouth and refrained from making any noise. "Fine. So be it, God King Sword. At least it sounds better than Chicky Sword. After confirming its name, Zhongxian tried to execute a sword formation through it, and indeed, it felt exceptionally smooth. He was able to channel his full strength through it with ease. Satisfied with the weapon, he nodded with a pleased smile. Even though it had been a dangerous fight, he had managed to get quite a few things out of the battle. He had gained some experience fighting a God King, and he had obtained this Chicky, God King sword. Using it together with his newly comprehended sword art, he would be able to put up a fight against ordinary God Kings and even slay them. More importantly, he had also finally managed to verify that his body really had an extraordinarily powerful regenerative prowess that did not pale in comparison to that of his clone at all. As long as his soul was not destroyed, even if his head was lopped off, he would still be able to recover easily. It was no exaggeration to say that he had gained a deathless body. Wait a moment. Zhongxian thought. Could this be because the energy that I've absorbed has little Chick's blood mixed into it? In the history of the Qi clan, there had been many cultivators who entered the lucid lunar lake. However, there had never been a case where any one of them gained a deathless body like him. Now that he thought about it, little Chick had been there with him, and its blood had seeped into the lake when it was killed by the violent energies within. Could that have something to do with this? Little Chick had been revealing many unique abilities ever since his time in the Azure. While it was still a gourd, its bathwater had been even more effective than the Heaven's Pathshanchi in healing injuries. Furthermore, it had been blasted into bits several times, but each time, it had revived successfully without any issues. Even though it was still unsure what kind of legendary beast it was clear that normal damage would not pose any harm to it. Instead, it seemed to nourish it. Each time it died, it would come back stronger than ever. Was that why his fighting prowess seemed to go up when he sustained more and more injuries while fighting against the God King earlier? Little Chick, are you able to transmogrify yet? Zhongxian asked curiously. Ordinary divine beasts were able to transmogrify once their cultivation reached low-tier God. Some stronger beasts required their cultivation to reach high-tier God before they were able to transmogrify. As for pure-blooded dragons like Aohua, they needed their cultivation to reach high-tier celestial God before they were able to morph into humans. Given that little Chick was already a God King, it should be able to transmogrify, right? I haven't given it a try yet, but I think it should be possible. Little Chick glanced at its fluffy body as it replied uncertainly. Give it a try then, Zhongxian said with a smile. With a nod, little Chick began to drive the energy within its body. Whew! Its little yellow body shuddered a little before swiftly morphing into a tall, well-built human body. I succeeded. I actually managed to transmogrify. Little Chick exclaimed excitedly. It turned to look at its master, hoping to share its joy with him. However, its master simply stared at it with googly eyes before smacking his own forehead in exasperation. Huh? What's wrong? Do I not look handsome to you? Little Chick asked in bewilderment. All this while, it had been thinking that it would transmogrify into a tall, dashing man and make its master envious. It did not expect its master to react in such a manner. What did he mean by that facepalm? Perplexed, little Chick reached out to touch its own face, only to freeze on the spot. Hey! Why didn't my head transform? At this very moment, even though its body had turned into that of a human, its face remained that of a yellow chick. From afar, it looked like a little chick with a monstrously well-toned body. It had hoped to become dashing once it transmogrified, but if it really walked down a crowded street in its current form, there would probably be no more effective social distancing method than this. I think you should drop the idea of transmogrifying. Just be content with being the chick you are, Zhongxian said helplessly. Knowing that it would really scare people off in its current form, the stifled little chick returned to its little fluffy body and nested itself on Zhongxian's shoulder. Let's go. Zhongxian walked over to one of the injured aerial celestial beasts and treated its injuries. Soon, he was well on his way toward the great displacement teleportation formation on its back. The God King earlier is an unaffiliated cultivator. During the earlier battle, Zhongxian had used the Library of Heaven's Path to check his opponent's background, and it turned out that he was just an unaffiliated cultivator in the sky of drifting specters. Thinking about it, That did make sense. Those who were in a clan did not have the privilege to take such a risk and act recklessly. Otherwise, they risked being obliterated by the Chi clan. As good as the beauty pill and breakthrough pill were, they were not worth gambling an entire clan's fate on. Knowing that there was no greater power behind the God King who assaulted him, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. It would have been annoying if he got involved in a whole string of incidents as a result of this. Fortunately, there were no more attempts by other cultivators along the way. He arrived at the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation without a hitch. At the peak of the mountain were dozens of towering pillars. Each of them was around several hundred meters tall, and they warded off the surrounding spiritual energy. Most likely, the teleportation formation was located at the center of these pillars. The Great Displacement Teleportation Formation required significant manipulation of spatial laws, so the surrounding spiritual energy had to be as stable as possible. For this reason, the pillars were erected in order to limit any disturbances from the surroundings. Zhongxian directed the aerial celestial beast to land a distance away from the teleportation formation. To not reveal the fact that he could fly, he walked over a step at a time. At the entrance, a guard stepped forward and blocked Zhongxian's path, saying, "Please show your token." Qi Ling'er had really not been exaggerating when she mentioned that the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation was tightly guarded. There were over 100 cultivators on standby here, and every single one of them possessed the strength of a high-tier celestial god. With their combined prowess, even a god king would have some trouble trying to bypass them. It seemed like the sky of drifting specters really viewed the teleportation formation with great importance. That explained why it was so difficult to obtain the right to use it. Zhongxian passed his token over. The guard examined the token carefully before clasping his fist respectfully. "Young Master Zhong, this way please." Those who were able to obtain the token were all the top experts in their respective fields in each of the skies. The guards would not dare to offend them. Following the guard, it was not long before Zhongxian was brought before the teleportation formation. However, it was a little different from what he had expected. There was no circular formation where one had to adjust the coordinates and altitude before activating it, which was how normal teleportation formations worked. However, what he saw instead was a cylindrical room with 8 doors. "Young Master Zhong, may I know which sky you are planning to visit?" "I intend to head to the capital of the sky of Spirit Origin Royal City," Zhongxian replied. "Please take the southern door over there." The guard pointed the way. With a grateful nod, Zhongxian walked toward the door with Little Chick. He pushed open the door and entered it. Beyond the door was a swirling screen of light. When he stepped in, his token released a brilliant glow that enveloped him and Little Chick together. The next moment, the world began spinning around him as a mysterious energy swallowed him whole. "Who?" He vanished from the spot. The effects of the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation were much more fearsome than the Minor Displacement Teleportation Formation. Even though Zhong Zuovi's cultivation had already reached high-tier celestial god, he still felt as if his body was going to be torn apart by the spatial turbulence. When he was finally able to open his eyes once more, he was standing right before a door. He took some time to drive his energy and recover from the toll of the teleportation before opening the door. The guard at the entrance standing on the other side of the door verified his token before allowing him to leave. "Is this the sky of Spirit Origin?" Zhongxian asked. "Yes. The city over there is Spirit Origin Royal City," the guard replied. Zhongxian turned his gaze over, and he could not help but gasp a little in astonishment. What appeared before him was a massive volcano with a large crater in the middle. The crater's radius was thousands of li, making it impossible to see the other end at a glance. It was also hard to tell just how deep it was, especially since it was impossible to extend one's spiritual perception into the volcano. Above the crater floated a city that was made up of massive volcanic rocks placed together. "Spirit Origin Royal City is floating?" Zhongxian was stunned. The sky of drifting specters had multiple floating mountains, but they were smaller, and they were resided by major powers within the city. But the entire Spirit Origin Royal City was actually floating. This sure was scary. Chapter 2181 Disguising as a God Monarch. Young Master Zhong, if you wish to enter Royal City, I can have my men take you up, the guard said with a smile. It was common for first-time visitors in the sky of spirit origin to react in such a manner. The sheer amount of energy required to continuously float an entire city was mind-boggling to most. Neither God Kings nor conferred God Kings would be capable of pulling off something like that. It would require the intervention of a God Monarch to do something like this. Soon enough, the guards brought an aerial divine beast over. The guard invited Zhongxian onto the back of the divine beast before getting on it himself, and the two of them began making their way toward the floating city. Even while they were making their way over, Zhongxian could feel a heavy pressure coming from the massive city above him. He activated the Eye of Insight to look before widening his eyes in surprise. He turned to look at the guard and said, I can't help but notice that there isn't a formation beneath the city to keep it in the air. How does it remain afloat? Typically speaking, an incredibly powerful formation would have been needed to keep such a massive city in the air. Yet, even when using his Eye of Insight, Zhongxian was unable to spot anything of the sort. Hearing those words, the guard chuckled softly before replying with a hint of pride, Spirit Origin Royal City doesn't rely on formations to remain afloat. Tchem? What does it rely on then? Zhongxian asked. The laws governing the firmament were exceptionally strong. The fact that only cultivators who had reached the God King realm were able to fly in the air was proof of that. Surely it was impossible for such a huge city to be a God King, right? If so, what could it be relying on other than formations to remain in the air? It's a feather, the guard replied with a smile. Back when the city was first constructed, it simply wouldn't fly no matter what we did. Just as everyone was at a loss as to what to do, the fire feather conferred king found a mystical feather somewhere and placed it beneath the city. Amazingly, supported by the feather, the entire city started floating in the air. Zhongxian was slightly surprised by the story. He turned to look at the bottom of the floating city, and there was indeed a humongous feather over several hundred li, long there. It seemed to be providing the force that kept the entire city floating stably in the air. At this moment, the voice of the yellow chick suddenly sounded by his ear side. I want to eat it. Eat your head. Zhongxian retorted speechlessly. Why is it that all that's in your head is food? It was one thing when you were a cute little chick, but you are a God King now. Could you pay more heed to your image? You might not care about your reputation, but I still value mine a lot. No, I don't want to eat my head. I want to eat that feather over there. Little Chick replied earnestly. Stop talking nonsense. You can't eat that feather, Zhongxian replied strictly. Putting aside how it was impossible for Little Chick to eat that massive feather, just the imposing aura it emanated was already far beyond what ordinary God Kings could deal with. Furthermore, Spirit Origin Royal City was relying on that feather to prop it up. If Little Chick somehow managed to eat it, he was certain that everyone in the sky of Spirit Origin would charge frenziedly at him to mince him. Fine. Seeing how its master was not allowing it to eat the feather, Little Chick shook its head in dejection. It leaped down from Zhongxian's shoulder and returned to his dantian. Since it was not allowed to eat that feather, it should just keep it out of sight so that it could ignore the feather. Otherwise, it would just get more and more hungry looking at it. The divine beast was extremely fast. It was not long before they arrived at the floating city. Can you tell me some of the things I should take note of while I'm at Spirit Origin Royal City? Also, just out of curiosity, I would also like to know more about the fire feather conferred king that you mentioned earlier, Zhongxian said as he passed a middle-tier god essence pill over. Given that the other party was an ordinary high-tier celestial god, a middle-tier god essence pill was already a substantial sum to him. As expected, the guard's attitude immediately changed as soon as he saw the middle-tier god essence pill. Accepting the gift heartily, he began explaining with a smile, as you know, young Master Zhong, Spirit Origin Royal City is the capital of the sky of Spirit Origin. It's ruled by the Spirit Origin Monarch, otherwise known as the Deathless Monarch. The fact that you were able to gain the rights to use the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation means that you possess strength on par with God Kings. Since that's the case, the only beings you really need to take note of are the 3 conferred God Kings. The first one is the Fire Feather God King whom I mentioned before. He possesses the bloodline of the Inferno Phoenix. He's exceptionally fearsome when he's in a state of rage. There's nothing in the world that he won't burn down. He's one of the stronger conferred God Kings in the firmament, and he governs the southern area of Royal City. The second one is the Glacier Feather conferred God King. He descends from the lineage of the Glacier Phoenix. Everything that he touches will be covered in a layer of frost. He governs the northern area of Royal City. Last but not least is the Tempestuous Feather God King. He has inherited the bloodline of the Tempestuous Phoenix, and he is known for his swift movements that are almost like teleportation. While his fighting prowess is lacking compared to the other two, he's the hardest to deal with of all. He governs the western area of Royal City. While hearing the guard's explanation, Zhongxian looked at the floating city beneath him and noted that the southern area was covered with heat waves whereas the northern area was snowing. There was a massive difference in the climates of the two sides of the city, as if they were two different worlds that were forcefully fixed together. While looking at the sight in wonderment, Zhongxian asked the guard beside him, since the three conferred God Kings possess the bloodline of phoenixes, does that mean that the spirit origin monarch? It felt too much of a coincidence for three conferred God Kings in the same region to be of the same species. Thinking about it, most of the top experts of the Sky of Cloud Dragon were descendants of the dragon tribe. Could it be the same for the Sky of Spirit Origin? You don't know about it? The guard asked in bewilderment. Know about what? Zhongxian was equally bewildered. Seeing how Zhongxian was really ignorant about this, the guard sighed deeply before replying. The Sky of Spirit Origin is known as the Sky of Deathlessness, and our God Monarch is also known as the Deathless Monarch. Do you know why our God Monarch is addressed as such? Zhongxian shook his head in response. The first response that came to his mind was that the Deathless Monarch might be an existence that was unaffected by death, but when he thought about the tomb that he had encountered in the Azure, he eventually chose to hold back his words. Perhaps the concept of eternity was not truly existent in the firmament either, even for the seemingly omnipotent God Monarchs. While God Monarchs were known to be lofty existences that transcended the laws of the world, they might not necessarily be as infallible as they appeared. The rise of Kong Shi was one perfect example. Furthermore, the fact that they were subordinates of the God Monarch of the Sky of Freedom also meant something. The reason our God Monarch is addressed by such is because he's a transmogrified beast as well. His true form is the noblest bloodline of the Nine Skies Phoenix tribe, the Deathless Celestial Phoenix, the guard explained with a hushed voice. If not for Zhongxian's generosity, he would not have spoken about the affairs of a God Monarch so easily. Deathless Celestial Phoenix? Zhongxian nodded in realization. It appeared that many of the God Monarchs were not humans after all. Do you know which God Monarchs of the Nine Skies are transmogrified beasts? Zhongxian asked. Seeing how a person of such high standing was actually oblivious to such common knowledge, the guard shook his head and said, those who are guarding the north, south, east, and west of the firmament are all transmogrified beasts. The true form of the Cloud Dragon Monarch from the eastern Sky of Cloud Dragon is an Azure Dragon. God Monarch Fuming of the Sky of Adamant Gold is a White Tiger. The Deathless God Monarch of our southern Sky of Spirit Origin is the Deathless Celestial Phoenix, otherwise known as the Vermilion Phoenix. And the Akron God Monarch of the northern Sky of Akron is the Black Tortoise. Zhongxian widened his eyes in realization. Even though he had learned quite a bit during his conversation with Fu Jiangchen, his knowledge regarding the 9 God Monarchs was still sorely lacking. He did not know that there was such a thing. Azure Dragon in the east, White Tiger in the west, Vermilion Phoenix in the south, and Black Tortoise in the north. All right, I have already said what I can say. You should get along with whatever you need to do. However, you should take note that the rules in Spirit Origin Royal City are pretty strict, so it'd be best if you try to stay out of trouble. There are cases where God Kings have been killed after causing trouble here. The guard offered his final word of warning before leaping back onto his aerial divine beast. Just give me a moment more. There's one last question that I would like to ask you, Zhongxian exclaimed to stop the guard from leaving. May I know where the God Monarch of the Sky of Spirit Origin resides? Also, do those in the city address him as the Spirit God? Indeed, Our god monarch is also known as the spirit god. In fact, the place where he resides is known as Spirit God Palace. However, it's said that Spirit God Palace has remained shut for decades now, and even the fire feather conferred God King hasn't been able to enter the premises, the guard said. I'm afraid that there's nothing more I can tell you about our god monarch. This is really the extent of my knowledge. Zhong Xian understood that he would be putting the guard on the spot by asking any more than this. Furthermore, it was unlikely that he would know much about what was happening in the upper echelons of the city. Thus, he asked, "Then, do you know anyone I could visit if I want to learn more?" "That depends on what you want to learn about," the guard said. "If it's just typical news, you can try your luck at the market. There are people from all walks of life there, so there's a great deal of information going around. Putting everything aside, I heard that those who are well connected in the market are even able to access the beauty pill that has recently gained a lot of attention in the sky of drifting spectre. If what you are trying to investigate is sensitive in nature, similar to what you asked about earlier, the market would surely prove insufficient. You would have to look for those in the clans of the 3 conferred god kings. Given their higher standing, they will surely know more about the matter. You have my gratitude." Zhong Xian clasped his fist before bidding farewell. The guard was right. It would indeed be unlikely for the ordinary citizens to know much about the affairs of the god monarch. If he wanted to know if Luo Ruoxin had really inherited the position of the deathless god monarch and become the next spirit god, his best bet would be the 3 conferred god kings. After all, they were likely the closest to the god monarch. The only issue was that conferred god kings were incredibly powerful existences, wielding strength that even god kings could not match. It would be hard for him to come into contact with them and make them listen to his words, unless he assumed an identity that even the conferred god kings feared. One perfect example would be how Qi Meng had mistaken him for a god monarch back in the sky of drifting spectre. Due to that, not only had he been able to purchase high-tier god essence pills with ease, most of his requests had been swiftly fulfilled. It was due to their support that the event he held to introduce the breakthrough pill had gone so successfully. With a solid identity, he would be able to easily uncover any information that he needed. Rubbing his glabella, he muttered thoughtfully, "Should I try disguising myself as a god monarch?" 1 li equals 0. 5 kilometers. Chapter 2182 The Right to Enter Spirit God Palace. This thought had barely surfaced in his mind for a moment before it was cast away. God monarchs were the strongest experts in the world. It was one thing if others misunderstood his identity. After all, they were the ones who would be humiliated if others realized that they had recognized the wrong person as their god monarch. However, if he was caught impersonating a god monarch, that could be viewed as an act of challenging the long-established authority of the god monarch. That could make him an enemy of the god monarchs. So, unless he was able to raise his strength, it was best to avoid such a risky move. This was similar to how if an artisan dared to forge the imperial seal and act as if they were the emperor, everyone in their lineage would be beheaded as a warning to others. Besides, even if he wanted to impersonate a god monarch, who should he impersonate? He knew far too little about the 9 god monarchs and their special abilities. He had asked Qi Linger directly about it previously, and it seemed like the Qi clan thought that he was the spirit god. Perhaps the Qi clan only made such a mistake due to their lack of understanding of the spirit god, but if he continued assuming the same identity in Spirit Origin Royal City, if the current spirit god was really Luo Ruoxin, that would be fine. If not, he would be royally screwed. Besides, what would be the point of it? Once the conferred god kings start asking questions, I'd end up giving myself away for sure. And a god monarch would be able to see through my disguise instantly. With Luo Ruoxin's disguise amulet, he could disguise himself as the member of some clan and fool ordinary humans. He had no confidence that he could do the same when it came to the god monarchs. It might be possible for conferred god kings to make a mistake, but would the god monarchs fail to recognize their own peers? If he could not get in contact with the conferred god kings and god monarchs even after impersonating a god monarch, there would be no point in him doing so in the first place. Thus, he pondered for a while longer, but no ideas came to mind. In the end, he looked at the guard ahead of him once more before saying, To be frank with you, I need to meet the deathless god monarch by hook or by crook. Do you know of any ways I could possibly do so? You wish to meet our god monarch? The guard shook his head. We would love to meet our god monarch too, but it's a pity that our cultivation is too low. Probably only those who have reached the level of a conferred god king are qualified for that. As the citizens of the sky of spirit origin, it was only normal for them to be curious about their own god monarch. However, if everyone was allowed to meet the god monarch, the latter would not have to do his work anymore. Just meeting everyone would be enough to tire him to death. Then what about entering Spirit God Palace? Zhong Xian asked. As the center of the sky of spirit origin, it shouldn't be possible for Spirit God Palace to be completely closed off from the world, right? It is possible to enter Spirit God Palace, but that won't be easy either. Usually, only those summoned by the god monarchs are allowed to enter the area. Even for the members of the three great clans, only the one who has triumphed over all others will be granted the right to enter Spirit God Palace to cultivate for a night, the guard replied. The strongest can cultivate for a night in Spirit God Palace? Zhong Xian asked. The most powerful ability of the Phoenix tribe is their ability to revive from ashes, the guard said. However, the only lineage to have inherited this ability is the deathless celestial phoenix. Furthermore, our god monarch has no offspring. So, he permitted the Phoenix tribe to hold a tournament among themselves every 100 years to select the most talented offspring to enter the deathless lava reservoir. Through the powers of the deathless lava reservoir, there's a chance that they can comprehend the quintessence of deathlessness, and with such a foundation, their cultivation and standing will catapult straight up. It's highly possible that the cultivator would be able to make a breakthrough to God King swiftly after that. The deathless lava reservoir? Zhong Xian was slightly surprised. Didn't the facility fall to ruin decades ago? He had heard about it from Zhuofeng, and it was known to be the #1 body tempering spot in the firmament. The only problem was that it had grown obsolete and could not be repaired anymore. Due to that, he had gone to the lucid lunar lake instead. I don't know the details, but even if it has fallen to ruin, the spiritual energy and laws infused into it should still exist. Furthermore, there are traces of our god monarch in Spirit God Palace. It would still be highly beneficial for a cultivator to cultivate inside the palace, the guard replied. Zhong Xian nodded silently. The higher one's cultivation, the deeper one's comprehension of the heavens. The god monarchs had reached a level where even a mere thoughtless gesture from them could become inspiration for others, such that one could contemplate over it for their entire life. This was similar to how Kongshi's teachings were still being interpreted by the cultivators in the master-teacher continent through the artifacts he had left behind. Even though the deathless lava reservoir had been destroyed, the opportunity to enter Spirit God Palace and cultivate for a night would still be highly beneficial to one's future cultivation. As long as I can enter Spirit God Palace, there's a good chance that I'll be able to meet Ruoxin. Zhong Xian clenched his fists tightly. Currently, it was difficult for him to ask about the affairs of the deathless monarch, and there was a good chance that the news he received wouldn't be reliable either. Furthermore, he might just get himself into trouble for probing too deeply. There was nothing more effective than entering Spirit God Palace himself and seeing the truth with his own eyes. With such a thought in mind, he hurriedly asked, "You mentioned that the most talented offspring of the three great clans is allowed to enter Spirit God Palace, right? How do they select the most talented offspring?" "It's through a tournament, of course," the guard replied. "You arrived just in time. The Centennial Tournament will be held just 5 days from now. Each of the clans will elect 10 of their most talented offspring to represent them in the tournament, and the one who emerges at the top will gain the right to enter Spirit God Palace. As for what kind of tournament it is, I'm afraid that I don't really know the details. So far, the news has caused quite a bit of commotion in Royal City, and there are many people looking forward to it." After asking a few more questions, Zhong Xian finally had a good grasp of the situation. There was only a single slot to enter Spirit God Palace every 100 years, so the tournament for it was extremely brutal. It was viewed as a huge festive affair that would attract a lot of spectators every single time. Even among the members of the three great clans, there were some requirements that one had to meet in order to become a candidate. Their cultivation had to be at high-tier celestial god at the very minimum, and their age must not have exceeded 30. Even with the superior bloodline of the Phoenix tribe, the criteria were more than enough to filter off most of the people. After all, not everyone was as monstrous as Zhongxian, who was able to overcome his bottleneck so easily. Other than that, one's bloodline needed to be sufficiently pure, and one's intelligence had to be decent as well. Otherwise, it would simply be a wasted opportunity if the winner of the tournament failed to comprehend the quintessence of deathlessness. While the guard was not sure about what the tournament format was, the tests were likely designed in a manner that assessed one's cultivation, temperament, and intelligence. Only those who had ticked off all the criteria would be able to rise to the top. Over the past month, the three great clans have been summoning their offspring back to Royal City so that they can make it in time for the selection, the guard said. Zhongxian nodded in response. It was common for offspring of clans to journey around the firmament to accrue some worldly experiences. Nevertheless, they would still gather together for something as important as this. Zhongxian proceeded to ask a few more questions, and the guard answered what he knew honestly. It was only after the guard bade farewell and left that he began venturing into the city. Spirit Origin Royal City was a floating city, but somehow, it did not feel any different from any landbound city. Walking through the streets, Zhongxian swiftly internalized the information that he had just received. Similar to the dragon tribe of the Sky of Cloud Dragon, the Phoenix tribe likely has a lot of offspring around the firmament. Some of them eventually returned, whereas the others chose to settle down elsewhere. As such, it's impossible for them to keep track of everyone in their lineage. Is it possible for me to come up with an alternative identity, similar to that of Luo Tianya, and try to sneak my way into one of the clans to acquire the opportunity? Chapter 2183 Feng Joga. A lineage with tens of thousands of years of history behind it would inevitably grow too big to log every single one of their members in their records. Some of their members might be killed while they were carrying out their mission, some of them might be trapped somewhere after stumbling upon a fortuitous encounter. There were simply too many people whose records were inconclusive, but in truth, their offspring were still living in the world. It was for this reason that the Sky of Cloud Dragon announced to the world that it would strictly deal with anyone who dared to trade or tame any beast possessing the dragon bloodline. The purpose of that was so that they could protect the members scattered all over the firmament and bring them back. This was a perfect identity for Zhongxian to gain the right to become one of their 10 representatives in the upcoming tournament. As long as no issues arose while his bloodline was being checked, he should be in a pretty safe position. As for whom he should impersonate, was that a problem at all? Those clans would have no idea how they could start tracking down his background. This is settled. Zhongxian ran through his plan once more, but he could not find any glaring issues with it. So, he began making his way toward the closest of the three great clans, the Inferno Phoenix clan. The buildings within the jurisdiction of the Inferno Phoenix clan were crimson in color. Basked in the searing glow of the sun, the entire city was as hot as a furnace. If not for the fact that everyone who lived in this area was at least at the god realm, they probably would not even have lasted a single minute there. Zhongxian's body had been tempered by the lucid lunar lake, making it on par with high-tier celestial god artifacts. Such a level of heat was well within his means to deal with. While walking through the streets, he asked the passers-by for where the Inferno Phoenix clan resided before heading over. Soon enough, he found himself standing before a humongous mansion. Just like with the Qi clan, it was surrounded by a powerful formation that prevented outsiders from entering the premises. Zhongxian did not try to barge his way through the formation. Instead, he headed to the tavern opposite the mansion. The guard whom he had talked to previously did not know too much about the political situation of the three great clans. As the saying went, the best place to gather information was the tavern, where people from all walks of life gathered. He might be able to gather some useful news that would help him later. At the very least, he would not be completely lost after entering the Inferno Phoenix clan. He chose a seat by the window and ordered some wine and meat before digging into his meal leisurely. At some point in time, the doors of the Inferno Phoenix clan suddenly creaked open, and a silhouette stumbled out before collapsing to the ground. Scram! Following that, Two young men walked out with a haughty attitude. The fallen youth struggled to his feet as he glared at the two haughty young men before him furiously. Feng Chao and Feng Xiong, you are too much. The youth was in his early 20s. One thing that stood out about him was the flame mark on his glabella. However, his face looked unnaturally pale, suggesting that he was not in the best condition. Too much, the young man known as Feng Chao sneered coldly. Feng Zhouge, are you still living in the era 2 years ago? You are no longer the genius you think you are, and your bloodline has also been burned dry. Don't you know that you have already been kicked out of the core lineage? Don't make us waste our time on you and scram. You were strong and talented 2 years ago, and we were nothing more than ants compared to you back then. But right now, you are nothing more than useless trash. Hurry up and get out of here. No one will speak up for you even if we throw you into the beast cages. Feng Xiong harumphed. Jeji. The youth named Feng Zhouge clenched his fists tight in anger. Indignation was written all over his face, but in the end, he did not say a word at all. With a darkened expression on his face, he quietly left the area. What a pity. Tragic, isn't it? Feng Zhouge was the most brilliant genius of the Inferno Phoenix clan several years ago, but due to an accident, his bloodline was ruined. All of a sudden, he was no longer able to raise his cultivation. On the contrary, he even grew weaker with time. Soon enough, he was kicked out of the core lineage, becoming a person whom anyone could pick on. This is how it is with large clans. If you are strong and talented, you will be a member of the core lineage that everyone respects. If not, you are nothing at all. With the receding of spiritual energy, even the Inferno Phoenix clan is facing a shortage of cultivation resources. Those who aren't in the core lineage receive very limited resources, so their accomplishments are essentially capped. This is simply the harsh reality of the world. There were many in the tavern who saw the earlier sight, and they began discussing with hushed voices. After hearing for a while, Zhongxian was able to roughly understand the story behind it. 2 years earlier, Feng Zhouge had been the most radiant star in the Inferno Phoenix clan. Despite his young age, he had already been a middle-tier celestial god. Not only so, his grasp of battle techniques also far surpassed his peers, making him an existence that countless look up to. It was just that fate liked to play pranks on people. In one of the missions he took on, he encountered something that caused him to sustain great injuries. Not only so, his bloodline seemed to have been forcefully torn out of his body, vanishing without a trace. As soon as the clan found out about it, the cultivation resources that he was entitled to decreased drastically, and many questioned his standing in the clan. Just a few days ago, there had been yet another check on his bloodline, and it was found that the purity of his bloodline had become so sparse that it could not even be compared to ordinary members in the side family. As a result, he was evicted from the core lineage and driven out of the clan. Unwilling to accept such an outcome, Feng Zhouge tried to appeal, only to be kicked out by Feng Chao and Feng Xiong. The earlier scene was a result of that. Back when he was the brightest star in the Inferno Phoenix clan, everyone was dying to fawn over him and lick his boots. The experts on the board of potential god kings viewed him as their brother, and Feng Chao and Feng Xiong did everything they could to get on his good side. But now that Feng Zhouge has fallen from grace, those two were the first ones to turn their backs on him. Well, this is just how the world is. It's usually the most humble and subservient lapdog that bites the most viciously when its master falls from grace. The crowd shook their heads. Those without strength were nothing at all in the firmament. This was simply how the world was, there was no one to blame for this. Amid discussions, the severely wounded Feng Zhouge walked into the tavern and sat down not too far away from Zhongxian. Without saying a word, he began gulping down wine in huge mouthfuls. Xian. Without saying a word, he began gulping down wine in huge mouthfuls. The renowned genius from before indeed did not look too powerful. His cultivation was only at low-tier celestial god, and his zhenqi felt exceptionally weak and sparse. From the looks of it, it seemed very possible for his cultivation to fall once more. I wonder what he encountered for his cultivation to start falling like that. Zhongxian did not feel particularly sympathetic to Feng Zhouge's plight, but he was intrigued by the latter's situation. Under normal circumstances, unless a cultivator suffered severe injuries to their meridians or dantian, it was very difficult for their cultivation to regress. He could tell that what the crowd had gossiped about earlier was not wrong. It was likely that Feng Joga had been a high-tier celestial god back at his peak, but right now, it felt like he would fall from the ranks of celestial gods very soon. Just what did he encounter to be faced with such a situation? Let me take a look. Zhongxian activated his eye of insight to take a closer look at the young man. A moment later, he frowned. Killing intent. The young man in front of him harnessed a surge of concentrated killing intent within his body. Even though the young man had hidden it well, it was still insufficient to circumvent the detection of the eye of insight. Most of those who have been on battlefields will have some degree of killing intent inside their body. Such was the case for Zhuofeng. But the killing intent in Feng Joga's body is oddly similar to that of the otherworldly demonic tribe. To think that the young man, Feng Joga, would have the killing intent of the otherworldly demonic tribe inside him. This had really spurred Zhongxian's curiosity. Chapter 2184 Treating Feng Joga. Having been through the master-teacher continent, Azure, and the firmament, Zhongxian was able to understand how the difference in spiritual energy could affect the lifeforms living in the environment. The differences between the three worlds lay mainly in the stability in spatial laws and temporal laws and the concentration of spiritual energy. It was mainly the difference in spiritual energy that resulted in a vast difference in the prowess of their cultivators. That was why lifeforms in the firmament were mostly born as semidivinities, and with just a bit of cultivation, they could easily become gods. The otherworldly demonic tribe carried extremely concentrated killing intent inside their bodies, making them extremely restless and bloodthirsty. However, through the absorption of the mercury-like spiritual energy in the azure, the concentrated killing intent within their bodies would be neutralized significantly. The spiritual energy in the firmament should have the same effect. Despite being a sovereign of the otherworldly demonic tribe, ever since arriving in the firmament, Liu Yang had found that no matter how he tried to drive his simplified Heaven's Path divine art in reverse, he was unable to recreate the killing intent of the otherworldly demonic tribe. This meant that the spiritual energy in the firmament was more than enough to neutralize the killing intent in his body. So, it was rather bewildering that Feng Joga actually had such killing intent within his body. Zhongxian turned toward the mansion of the Inferno Phoenix clan, where there were guards on standby outside. Through the eye of insight, he could tell that those people shared the same bloodline as Feng Joga, but they did not have any killing intent in their bodies. The deathless celestial phoenix is the old ancestor of the Phoenix tribe, as well as the spirit god of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Given so, it isn't too odd for his descendants to harness killing intent within their bodies. What was odd, however, was that only Feng Joga possessed killing intent within his body. What made him so special that he had something that his peers did not? Zhongxian examined Feng Joga a little longer, but he still was not able to discern the cause of this anomaly through his eye of insight. So, picking up his wine vat, he began walking toward Feng Joga's table. He sat opposite to the young man, and without saying a word, he began gulping down his wine. Noticing Zhongxian's presence, Feng Joga frowned in displeasure. He waved his hands impatiently as he grunted, "Scram, I might have become the trash of the Inferno Phoenix clan, but I'm still not someone that just anyone can make fun of. I happened to hear of the tournament that will be happening within the clan very soon, so I rushed all the way to Spirit Origin Royal City. I only happened to hear of your affair coincidentally. Don't worry, I bear no ill will toward you. I just wanted some company for a drink," Zhongxian replied heartily. "You are a member of the Inferno Phoenix clan too?" Feng Joga raised his head to look at Zhongxian doubtfully. "You can say that," Zhongxian replied without explaining further. Then, he leaned in a little and said curiously, "I noticed that your foundation is quite firm, and there are no visible injuries on your body. Why is your cultivation regressing?" Humph. Feng Joga was just starting to feel some goodwill toward the young man before him when the latter suddenly started rubbing salt in his wound. His face immediately turned livid. His cultivation might have regressed, but his eyes were still sharp. He could tell that the young man before him was even stronger than him when he was at his peak. If not for that, he would have already lost his temper. You are thinking too much. On top of being a member of the Inferno Phoenix clan, I am also quite a renowned physician. Well, to be frank, I only approached you because I found your condition quite mystifying. That being said, I believe that I might be able to help you. Noticing Feng Zhouge's enmity, Zhongxian took out the Great Displacement Teleportation Formations token and passed it over. The name of the owner and his accomplishment that granted him the right to use the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation was inscribed on the token. Taking a look at the token, Feng Zhouge narrowed his eyes in astonishment. Then, he slowly lifted his gaze to look at Zhongxian once more, but this time, his eyes were filled with agitation. As someone who had once been part of the core lineage of the Inferno Phoenix clan, he knew just how difficult it was to earn the right to use the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation. He could not have obtained it even if he wanted to back when he was at his peak. Yet, the young man before him had earned the right to it on the basis of his medical skills. That effectively meant that his medical skills were at the forefront of the nine skies. I don't know what is going on either, Feng Zhouge replied with a deep sigh as he placed the wine vat on the table. Ever since that mission, it feels like my body is full of holes. No matter how I try to absorb spiritual energy, I'm unable to retain it in my body. That's not all. My cultivation is also slowly slipping away with time. Over the past 2 years, my cultivation has fallen all the way to my current state. You aren't able to retain spiritual energy in your body? Zhongxian nodded pensively. Can you execute a punching routine for me? Of course. Knowing that the young man was a formidable physician, Feng Zhouge stood up without any hesitation and released a punch. As if a massive dragon rising from the sea to seek its prey, his punch carried a domineering pressure that forced his opponent to submit to him. Just by looking at the conceptualization behind his punch, it was obvious that he was a true genius in martial arts. However, barely after the punch advanced halfway through, it suddenly came to a halt. It felt like Feng Zhouge had suddenly run out of steam, preventing him from utilizing his true strength. At the same time, Feng Zhouge's face paled, and a grunt escaped his lips. Back at his peak, he could easily execute such a move 100 times without feeling the slightest bit of exhaustion. Yet, he could not even finish a single punch now before feeling utterly fatigued. This made him feel deeply despaired. He felt like the him from 2 years ago had really vanished and would never return. The thought of having to live his life like that frightened him greatly. Sighing deeply, Feng Zhouge looked at Zhongxian with a wry look on his face and said, "Pardon me, I'll try again." "There's no need for that," Zhongxian interjected as he immersed his consciousness in the library of Heaven's Path. He had already managed to compile a book on the young man's condition. It doesn't seem like there's anything here that could affect his cultivation though. Zhongxian frowned. There were many flaws recorded in the book, but none of them explained the reason behind Feng Zhouge's fall in cultivation. In other words, even the library of Heaven's Path was able to discern the reason behind his falling cultivation. This was really perplexing. Ever since the library of Heaven's Path reawakened in the firmament, he had been able to see through even the flaws of a conferred God King. So, why was he unable to uncover the reason behind Feng Zhouge's current condition? "Do you mind if I check your pulse?" Zhongxian asked. "I am grateful that you are willing to offer your help, but it's fine if you aren't able to solve it. I have already grown used to it now." Feng Zhouge keenly noticed the changes in Zhongxian's expression, and his expectant gaze slowly died off. He had consulted many physicians on his situation before, and some of them were well known in the sky of spirit origin. Unfortunately, none had been able to determine the reason behind his condition. He dared not get his hopes up out of fear that he would only be disappointed once more. "I'm just taking a look. It's not as if you will lose anything," Zhongxian grumbled. "I guess so. There's nothing more I can lose in my current state anyway." Feng Zhouge sighed deeply. With his cultivation and standing taken away from him, he found himself completely alone in the world. There was no one who was willing to associate themselves with him after his downfall. He felt like he had already lost everything. Besides, the young man seated in front of him was far stronger than him. There was nothing he could do if the other party intended him harm. So, He stretched his arm out toward Zhongxian. Zhongxian placed his finger on Feng Zhouge's pulse and infused a surge of heaven's path Zhenqi discreetly into his body. Tzzzz. Zhongxian navigated his Zhenqi through Feng Zhouge's meridians carefully, and just as it was passing through a certain point, it suddenly halted. Hu! The surge of Zhenqi abruptly dissipated without a trace, as if it had never existed. This. Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in shock. The heaven's path Zhenqi had never failed him. Ever since he cultivated the pathos of heaven, its prowess had been greater than ever. Yet, there was something inside Feng Zhouge's body that was able to make his heaven's path Zhenqi dissipate. Just what in the world was happening? Chapter 2185 Pufferfish. Dumbstruck, Zhongxian drove another surge of Zhenqi to the same area once more. But before he knew it, the surge of Zhenqi dissipated. It was as if there was some sort of peculiar energy lurking inside Feng Zhouge's body, swallowing his heaven's path Zhenqi. This unusual situation made Zhongxian narrow his eyes. Even a god king would be restrained by him after swallowing his heaven's path Zhenqi, but the thing in Feng Zhouge's body was able to devour his heaven's path Zhenqi. Could Feng Zhouge's falling cultivation be the result of the thing inside his body constantly swallowing his Zhenqi? Let's see how much you can take in. This situation had triggered Zhongxian's competitiveness. He began to drive his Zhenqi into Feng Zhouge's body furiously through his meridians. Initially, he had only sent in an extremely small amount out of fear that Feng Zhouge would notice it, but at this point, he pulled out all the stops. He did not believe that the thing inside Feng Zhouge's body would be able to swallow all the energy he was sending over. Meanwhile, sensing an insane amount of Zhenqi suddenly surging into his body, Feng Zhouge's eyes widened into circles. An overpowering pressure carrying the weight of the heavens rushed rampantly into his body. He felt like his soul would be torn apart at this rate. So, he anxiously tried to withdraw his wrist, only to realize that the other party's fingers were holding onto him firmly like a pair of metal tongs. No matter how he tugged and pulled, he was unable to retract his hand. Feng Zhouge wanted to shout out loud, but the other party's Zhenqi was simply too strong. He felt like he was being utterly subdued by the force, preventing him from even speaking properly. On the other hand, Zhongxian was completely unaware of Feng Zhouge's state. He had closed his eyes in order to focus entirely on dealing with the thing in Feng Zhouge's body. Under the rush of his heaven's path Zhenqi, he was finally able to perceive what the thing was. It was a grey congregation of energy, but he could not tell exactly what it was. As Zhongxian channeled his Zhenqi to charge at the grey congregation of energy, the latter immediately released a green glow. No, it isn't swallowing my Zhenqi. Rather, the two forces are neutralizing one another. He was perplexed as to what kind of force was capable of swallowing his heaven's path Zhenqi, but it seemed like he was mistaken. The two forces were actually thinning down one another. When his heaven's path Zhenqi collided with the grey stream of energy, the two forces transformed into a green glow of energy before dissipating. No, that doesn't seem to be it. The grey congregation of energy doesn't seem to be neutralizing all of my heaven's path Zhenqi. His heaven's path Zhenqi was swiftly vanishing as it collided with the grey congregation of energy, but weirdly enough, while a huge chunk of it was vanishing, there was still a small portion that was being left behind. Going by proportions, in about 100 surges of Zhenqi, there would be one surge that was retained. Wait a moment. Is this refinement? Zhongxian's heart skipped a beat. He could sense it. The heaven's path Zhenqi that remained had been purified by at least tenfold. While he could not sense exactly how much stronger it had become, it was clear that it had gone through a transformative change. That's not exactly it either. It seems to be neutralizing my heaven's path Zhenqi, leaving behind just the Zhenqi I've cultivated after comprehending the pathos of heaven. Currently, there were two different types of Zhenqi mixed into Zhongxian body, the heaven's path Zhenqi, which he cultivated using the heaven's path divine art, and the upgraded version of it after he started cultivating the pathos of heaven. Those two were mixed together, and it was extremely hard to separate them from one another. Given the difficulty in doing so, Zhongxian had not bothered dealing with it. Yet, who could have known that he would be able to do it through the grey congregation of energy? The grey congregation of energy was able to neutralize his heaven's path zhenqi, but it was utterly helpless against the zhenqi that he had cultivated using the pathos of heaven. As a result, it created an effect similar to refinement. I didn't think you'd be so useful to me. Since you can refine my zhenqi, I'll give you more of it. With such a thought in mind, Zhongxian continued blasting his zhenqi into Feng Zhouge's body. As the two continued colliding with one another, the green glow grew brighter and brighter. Even though there was only a single congregation of the grey energy, it seemed to be exceptionally pure. He had been at this for quite a few minutes, but he had only managed to dissipate half of the grey congregation of energy. It seemed like the opponent was tougher than he thought. Taking a deep breath, he was just about to clear away the grey congregation of energy in one shot when he suddenly felt someone patting his shoulder. His instincts told him that the person did not bear any malicious intention toward him. That being said, a slight frown still etched its way onto his face from being disturbed. While continuing to infuse zhenqi into Feng Zhouge's body, he turned to look at the person, only to freeze in place. Unknowingly, dozens of people had gathered around him. Most of them were the customers who had been drinking there, and that included the middle-aged men who had been gossiping about Feng Zhouge. As for the one who had patted his shoulder, he was an elder who had a walking stick in hand. "What's wrong?" Zhongxian asked in confusion. "I didn't want to get involved in your business, but no matter what, we are in the territory of the Inferno Phoenix clan. If something happens here and we are found to have simply watched on silently, we will all get into a great deal of trouble. It won't be good for you to get on the bad side of the Inferno Phoenix clan. As one of the elders in this tavern, I can only intervene in this matter. So, pardon me for asking, but what kind of grudge do you have with Feng Zhouge?" the elder asked while stroking his beard. His voice was very refined. From his tone of speech, he was likely an academic. Zhongxian was surprised by the question. He shook his head and replied, "There's no grudge between us." The elder frowned. "If that's the case, why are you grabbing his wrist?" Zhongxian was still wondering what was going on when he heard those words. He chuckled softly and replied, "He has been afflicted with an abnormal condition. I am treating him in my capacity as a physician." Is that so? Well, I'm not very sure how I should put this in a way that doesn't sound rude, but..." The elder slowly moved his glance toward Feng Zhouge before asking hesitantly, "Are you certain that you are really treating him?" "Am I certain if I am treating him?" Zhongxian was completely baffled by that question. He subconsciously followed the elder's gaze, and when he saw what was before him, he could not help but freeze in place once again. The person he was holding onto was not the devilishly dashing Feng Zhouge. Instead, it was a well-rounded man that was 2 meters in height and at least 400 jin, heavy. "Who are you?" Zhongxian quickly released his grasp in shock. When did this round man get there? How in the world did he not realize that the person he was holding onto had changed? Noticing that the look of surprise on Zhongxian's face was genuine, the elder shook his head and explained, "I was watching the situation, so I can tell you with certainty that he's none other than Feng Zhouge. Shortly after you grabbed his wrist, he turned into his current state." "He is Feng Zhouge." Zhongxian's lips twitched. He was certain that Feng Zhouge had still been perfectly normal a moment ago. How did he turn into such a state? Wait a moment. Is this the result of me infusing my zhenqi endlessly into his body? Zhongxian covered his mouth as he gasped in shock. He did pump quite a lot of energy into Feng Zhouge, and the collision of the two energies produced the potent green glow. Given how forceful he had been, there was no way Feng Zhouge could have expelled or withstood the accumulating energy within his body. But was it possible for a person's body to really swell up like a balloon? The situation felt ridiculous. Zhongxian closed his eyes and created a mental image of how Feng Zhouge looked earlier. Then, he blew up his features by approximately 5 times. Yup, there was no mistake about it. The person sitting before him was indeed Feng Zhouge. Zhongxian suddenly found himself at a loss as to how he should respond. Should he apologize right away, or should he attempt to brush it off as a joke? It had to be said that Feng Zhouge did bear some resemblance to the otherworldly demons. Was that the concept behind the otherworldly demonic tribe? 1 jin equals 0. 5 kilograms. Chapter 2186 Feng Joga's new teacher. So, I have to ask you to think twice about your decision. Since you have no enmity with him, I'll pull my weight as the elder here and offer you some words of advice, the elder exclaimed. Even though Feng Joga has been expelled from the Inferno Phoenix clan, he used to be one of their members. If you'd killed him discreetly, they might have turned a blind eye to it. However, your act of torturing and humiliating him in public blemishes the reputation of the Inferno Phoenix clan. They won't allow anyone to undermine the honor of the Phoenix tribe. So, I have to ask you to think twice about your decision. Zhongxian rubbed his glabella. Am I actually the villain here? As expected of an old academic. He sure knew how to beat about the bush to build his case, even though it made him seem really naggy. However, it seemed like the other party had misunderstood his intention. He was earnestly trying to help Feng Joga, not torture him. Knowing that the old man was advising him with goodwill, Zhongxian clasped his hand politely and replied, I appreciate your advice, and I'll take it in mind. However, allow me to reassure you that this is a part of the treatment process. After saying his piece, he immediately turned his gaze back to Feng Joga. The latter had rounded so well that his face, as well as his body, looked like a sphere. Zhongxian pondered for a moment before taking out a jade token. He swiftly infused a cultivation technique into it before passing it over to Feng Joga. Cultivate this technique. It'll alleviate your current condition. What are you up to? Feng Joga was finally able to speak after being released by Zhongxian. He felt so stifled that he could have exploded on the spot. Initially, when he first saw the other party's token, he had thought that the other party might just be able to save him. It was with such thoughts in mind that he had allowed the other party to feel his pulse. Yet, who could have known that the other party would suddenly start sending Zhenqi furiously into his body, causing him to end up in such a state? Zhongxian was just about to explain that he did not know such a situation would happen, but at the very last moment, he halted himself from doing so. If he said such words, he would immediately lose his credibility as a physician. So, he stood up from his seat and placed his hands behind his back. With a solemn and profound look on his face, he said, I have already found the way to save you. This is merely the first step. The first step? Feng Joga was stunned. So, your first step is to blow me up into a balloon? I've never heard of such a treatment method before. If you wish to resolve your current condition and restore your talent and strength, you will do well to heed my words and practice the cultivation technique I have given you. Zhongxian replied gravely. The seriousness of his tone made Feng Joga fall into deep thought. For the past 2 years, he had consulted many skilled physicians, and all of them had told him that they were utterly helpless. In fact, they were not even able to figure out the reason behind his condition. On the other hand, the young man before him had actually told him that he had found a way to cure him, and they were already at the first step. Was this for real? Forget it, I'll bet everything on this. Right now, he did not have the right to doubt the credibility of the young man before him. He was no longer the talented young man of the Inferno Phoenix clan whom everyone was dying to fawn over. He had nothing but his life to lose. Since that was the case, he might as well take a gamble. Without any hesitation, he placed his finger on the jade token and immersed his consciousness into it. A cultivation technique flowed into his mind. With just a swift look at the cultivation technique, his body starting trembling. As an ex-core member of the Inferno Phoenix clan, he had a sharp eye for good stuff. Even though the cultivation technique was just an ordinary formula for him to refine and assimilate energy, it was far more ingenious than any secret manual that he had seen. In fact, even the most confidential secret art within the clan paled in comparison to it. To offer him such a cultivation technique without any hesitation. Was the other party sincere about saving him? This immediately reignited the flames of hope in his eyes. Without any hesitation, he began channeling his Zhenqi in his body according to the cultivation technique. Even though his cultivation had been regressing over the past 2 years, there was no doubt that his intelligence was beyond ordinary. It did not take him long to fully master the cultivation technique that Zhongxian had imparted to him, allowing him to swiftly assimilate the energy that had caused his body to bloat. Tzzz. Each time he drove his zhenqi a circulation around his body, his bloated body would contract a bit. By the time he was on his 20th circulation, his body had already reverted to normal. Feng Zhouge stood up and looked at his own body with a mystified look on his face. Being able to assimilate that much energy so quickly felt like a miracle. This made him trust the young man before him even more than before. He excitedly looked at Zhongxian and asked, "May I know what the next step is?" Feng Zhouge could also tell that the treatment was incomplete, as even though he had just gained a huge bulk of energy, he was still losing energy as time passed. "I need to repeat step 1 again in order to properly cleanse your body of what is within it," Zhongxian replied. There was little doubt at this point that the grey congregation of energy was the cause of the constant decline in Feng Zhouge's cultivation. Thus, the only way to save him was to find a way to clear his body of the grey congregation of energy. In that sense, he was not exactly lying to Feng Zhouge. However, Feng Zhouge's lips started twitching upon hearing those words. He was going to have to go through that painful experience again. Seeing the look on Feng Zhouge's face, Zhongxian harumphed coldly. "It looks like you are quite reluctant to continue. If that's the case, I don't see any need for me to take on something that is more effort than it's worth. Let me tell you this treatment is not only unbeneficial to me, it'll also affect my cultivation. Do you think that it's without cost that I infused my zhenqi into your body?" As he spoke, he rose to his feet and started walking back to his original seat. Elder, please wait a moment." There was no way Feng Zhouge could allow his only ray of hope to walk away just like that. He immediately rushed over to stop Zhongxian. Given that he had nothing on him, the other party had indeed nothing to gain by saving him. On the other hand, if he missed this opportunity, his cultivation would only continue to become weaker and weaker, and eventually, he would be killed by his enemies. "Please save me. I'll do anything for you as long as you can resolve my affliction," Feng Zhouge pleaded. Zhongxian turned around and looked at Feng Zhouge quietly for a moment before harumphing once more. "I hope that you can appreciate the sacrifices I am making. In order to save you, not only will we have to repeat the steps from earlier, I'll also have to teach you some of the cultivation techniques of my lineage. These cultivation techniques are highly confidential, so I can only proceed if you acknowledge me as your teacher." From how quickly Feng Zhouge was able to comprehend the cultivation technique imparted to him earlier, it was apparent that he was indeed a genius. On top of that, Feng Zhouge possessed the bloodline of the Inferno Phoenix clan, and he possessed a huge secret. If he could accept Feng Zhouge as his disciple, it would be easier for him to ask the other party questions, and the latter could also help him find a way to get into Spirit God Palace. "Teacher, I ask you to save me." It did not take too long before Feng Zhouge made up his mind and kneeled on the floor. He could tell that from the cultivation technique that he had been given earlier that the other party was no ordinary figure. Furthermore, the fact that he possessed the token to the Great Displacement Teleportation Formation showed that he was both strong and skilled in medicine. Since his clan had already forsaken him, leaving him to fend for himself, there was no harm in him acknowledging the young man as his teacher. At the very least, the young man would become his backing. Good. Zhongxian nodded in satisfaction upon seeing how decisive Feng Zhouge was. He sat down once more and placed his finger back on top of the latter's pulse. He had no idea whether he would really become stronger or not after refining his zhenqi. After all, he was compromising quantity for quality, but it should still be beneficial to him in the long run. With such thoughts in mind, he began to channel his zhenqi into the latter's body once more. Under Zhongxian's rapid infusion of zhenqi, Feng Zhouge's body swiftly bloated up once more, to the point that he looked no different from a ball from afar. Seeing that Feng Zhouge had reached his limit, Zhongxian stopped his infusion and instructed Feng Zhouge to practice the cultivation technique that he had just imparted to him once more to alleviate his condition. Just like that, the cycle repeated again and again. Finally, after the fourth cycle, the grey congregation of energy within Feng Zhouge's body had finally been completely cleansed. Seeing this, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. "You should be fine now. Give it a try," Zhongxian urged Feng Zhouge with a smile. With the grey congregation of energy neutralized, Feng Zhouge should be able to recover his previous strength and talent easily, and he might reach an even higher level than before. Chapter 2187 The Disaster of Spirit Origin Royal City. As Feng Zhouge was unable to sense the presence of the grey congregation of energy, he could not sense any distinct difference in his physical condition as a result of Zhongxian's treatment. So, with a skeptical look on his face, he quietly sat down and began driving his zhenqi according to his cultivation technique. It did not take him long to notice that something had changed within him. Previously, his zhenqi would suddenly start vanishing before he could even circulate it a full round through his meridians, and the more vehemently he tried to drive his zhenqi, the more energy he would lose. But this time, his zhenqi did not vanish. Not only so, his dried-out dantian was suddenly flourishing with energy, threatening to erupt in him like a volcano. In truth, the spiritual energy he had cultivated over the past 2 years had not completely vanished. Instead, it had been hidden by the grey congregation of energy. As if a river freed of its dam, it spurted out uncontrollably and gushed all over his body. It was as if he was being born anew. Boom! His cultivation that was on the verge of falling beneath celestial god realm began shooting up at a crazy pace, barging through bottleneck after bottleneck relentlessly. Low-tier celestial god realm intermediate stage. Low-tier celestial god realm advanced stage. Low-tier celestial god realm pinnacle. In less than 15 minutes, he managed to surpass his former peak to reach high-tier celestial god realm pinnacle. Feeling the overflowing energy within his body, Feng Zhouge's eyes reddened. At this very instant, he knew that he had managed to overcome the adversity that stood in his path to rise once more. And the reason he could do so was due to the young man before him. Teacher. Feng Zhouge kneeled on the floor and kowtowed. Previously, he had only acknowledged Zhongxian as his teacher because he thought that he had no other way out of this. Yet, he was starting to realize that this might be the wisest decision he had made in his life. Rise. Zhongxian said as he helped Feng Zhouge up. At the same time, he took a look at his library of Heaven's Path and saw that, just like with Zhuoyang, a golden page had formed. The 2 golden pages were placed on the bookshelves side by side, emanating a brilliant sheen. Feng Zhouge has recovered his cultivation? No, that's not all. He even managed to advance further than before. Who is that physician? He's amazing. The crowd in the tavern could hardly believe their eyes. The elder from before also widened his mouth in shock. This. In the end, it turned out that the young man had really been trying to treat Feng Zhouge. To think that he wasted so many of his words for nothing. Humph. Paying no heed to the shocked crowd, Zhongxian looked at Feng Zhouge and asked, "What did you encounter 2 years ago that caused your cultivation to start dropping so drastically?" "I took on a mission that required me to visit the abyss beneath Royal City," Feng Zhouge said. "I unintentionally entered a hidden dimension, but for some reason, I lost consciousness. By the time I came to once more, I was already like that. I have no idea what really happened to me." The abyss beneath Royal City. Zhongxian repeated the key phrase in Feng Zhouge's words. Spirit Origin Royal City was indeed floating right above a massive abyss. Was there some sort of secret hidden inside the abyss? Seeing that Zhongxian was unfamiliar with the history of Spirit Origin Royal City, Feng Zhouge began explaining it. The abyss suddenly appeared several decades ago, causing the entire Spirit Origin Royal City to collapse into it. The 3 conferred god kings spent a great deal of their strength and a feather of the deathless monarch in order to rebuild Spirit Origin Royal City back to its prosperous state, which is also what you see today. As an ex-core member of the Inferno Phoenix clan, he knew quite a bit about the confidential secrets regarding the city. The entire Spirit Origin Royal City collapsed into the abyss. Zhongxian was stunned. To be honest, he had been quite intrigued when he first saw Spirit Origin Royal City. There was no reason for the city to have been built above an abyss, and there was no reason it should be flying. In the end, it turned out that things had only happened that way because they had no other choice. The capitals of the 9 skies were situated at the center of the territories so as to gather all of the fortune and anima of yearning around. For this reason, they could not be shifted easily. As such, even when Spirit Origin Royal City collapsed decades ago, in order to avoid any instability, they could only continue building upon where the land had collapsed. The result of that was the current floating city. If the city collapsed abruptly, what happened to the people living there? Zhong Xian asked. I wasn't born back then, so I don't really know the details. However, based on what I have heard from the elders in the clan, it seems like even though the collapse was very abrupt, quite a few people still managed to escape with their lives due to the protection of the Deathless Monarch. Basically, almost everyone who had reached the God realm survived that crisis. But then, Feng Zhouge sighed deeply before continuing. Still, as you know, the firmament is mostly filled with people whose cultivation has yet to reach the God realm. In other words, that crisis took away nearly 90% of the population of Spirit Origin Royal City. No one knows whether they are living within the abyss or are already dead. The abyss is simply too deep, such that even the fire feather conferred God King isn't able to get to the bottom of it. The tier of life on the firmament followed a pyramid shape. Most of the population were just ordinary people, or in other words, semi-divinities. Only 10% of them were able to earn the rights to cultivate and rise to greater heights. An abyss suddenly appeared, causing 90% of the people in the city to vanish all of a sudden. Zhong Xian's body jolted as 4 words surfaced in his mind: City of Collapsed Space. Legend had it that the City of Collapsed Space of the Azure had suddenly fallen from the heavens several thousand years ago. The life forms and buildings within the city had gradually transformed into the air of degeneration under the corrosion of the Azure's spiritual energy, making it a dangerous land that no one dared to enter easily. Could that have something to do with Spirit Origin Royal City? This hypothesis was not completely without basis, as Zhong Xian had seen the tomb of the Deathless Monarch back in the City of Collapsed Space. If he thought deeper into it, the otherworldly demonic tribe and the Azure's Starchaser Palace came from the same origin, and those from Starchaser Palace had the altar of the City of Collapsed Space. Could it be that Spirit Origin Royal City had fallen through the cracks of the dimension barrier and plummeted into the Azure? A portion of those living there had managed to survive the impact, and they went on to create Starchaser Palace. On the other hand, there was also a portion of people who plummeted further into the Master-Teacher continent and eventually came to be known as the otherworldly demonic tribe. If that was the case, it meant that the ancestors of the otherworldly demonic tribe and Starchaser Palace were actually gods of the sky of Spirit Origin. He really had to look deeper into this matter. If there was a power that could kill the Deathless Monarch and thrust countless lives through the dimension barrier and onto the lower worlds, he needed to be wary. It could pose a terrifying threat in the future. Traveling through the dimension barrier was no easy feat. He had experienced it himself, so he knew how difficult it was. Even an expert of Luo Ruoxin's caliber had nearly lost her life in the process of doing so. This was a cause for concern. Then again, all of this was just his conjecture. Perhaps he would only uncover the truth after meeting Luo Ruoxin or Kongsha. Oh right, I can ask him. Vicious. Is there any chance that your predecessors possess the bloodline of the gods? Zhong Xian asked. Sealed in the Book of Heaven's Path, Vicious had followed him to the firmament as well. All this while, Zhong Xian had been giving him god essence pills so that he could cultivate as well. Over the past few days, he managed to overcome his bottleneck as a god to become a low-tier celestial god. Chapter 2188 Returning to the Inferno Phoenix Clan. I don't really know, Vicious replied. However, after coming to the firmament, I can clearly feel that my rate of cultivation has become faster than before. It feels like my meridians and bloodline are thriving in this environment. Previously, in order to reconstruct Zhao Yue's meridians, Zhong Xian had studied many meridian networks, and eventually, he had found that there were very few flaws in the meridian network of the otherworldly demonic tribe. After coming to the firmament, he had also noticed that their meridian network was very similar to that of the gods. The meridian network of the gods was indubitably the most aligned with the heavens and the nature of the myriad worlds. It was based on this foundation that they were able to raise their cultivation far beyond the lifeforms on the Master-Teacher continent and the Azure. It was also for this same reason that the otherworldly demons were blessed with superior strength and greater longevity, putting them at a decisive advantage over the humans. If not for Kongsha's ascendance, the cultivators of the master-teacher continent would never have been able to drive them back to the otherworldly battlefield by themselves. A thought suddenly came to Zhongxian. If your rate of cultivation has increased after coming here, is it possible that your predecessors were also afflicted with the same problem as Feng Zhouge, resulting in their cultivation gradually falling with time? If the reason Feng Zhouge's cultivation had started falling was because he had come in contact with something in the abyss, perhaps the original population of Spirit Origin Royal City had also been afflicted with the same things in their cultivation falling further and further. From semi-divinities, they fell through the ranks to become high immortals, true immortals, pseudo-immortals, ancient sages, great sages, saints. I don't really know, Vicious replied. I guess I'll have to find a way to enter the abyss in order to know the results, Zhongxian murmured. Having come to a decision, he raised his head to look at Feng Zhouge. Can you bring me to the place that you mentioned earlier? Feng Zhouge hesitated. That place was simply too dangerous. Even with his current strength, he still felt apprehensive about getting close to the abyss. There's no need to worry. We can retreat right away as soon as we encounter any danger. Furthermore, your condition is a little unique. I've managed to suppress the issue in your body for the time being to prevent it from devouring your energy, but a relapse is always possible. If you wish to completely cure your affliction, we'll have to head to the place where everything started and search for the root cause, Zhongxian said. He knew that he had to pay a visit to the abyss regardless of the cost. He knew that Feng Zhouge would be hesitant to approach the area once more, so he could only phrase it in such a manner. Strictly speaking, he had not lied. Till now, he still had not figured out what that grey congregation of energy was. As long as they could not get to the bottom of the matter, there was no saying that the grey congregation of energy would not make a comeback. All right then. I'll take you there. Feng Zhouge bit his lips as he agreed reluctantly. However, in order to enter the abyss, you will need a certain object, and that object can only be found within the clan. I'll have to make a trip back to my clan to fetch it. An object? Zhongxian asked. The abyss is fraught with danger. Even conferred god kings aren't able to venture to the bottom of it. To avoid any accidents from occurring, the 3 conferred god kings devoted a tremendous amount of energy to seal up the passageway, such that only those who possess their token can enter the area, Feng Zhouge replied. Without the token, even if you stand before the abyss entrance, you will have no way of entering it. Zhongxian nodded in response. Even though he had managed to raise his cultivation considerably over the last few days, it would indeed still be difficult for him to bypass a formation set up by the 3 conferred god kings. Rather than courting trouble, it would be more convenient if he followed Feng Zhouge back to his clan. Anyway, it just so happened that he needed to complete his disguise as a member of the Inferno Phoenix clan anyway, and he would appear much more credible if he had Feng Zhouge by his side. Having made up their minds, the 2 of them quickly left the tavern and walked over to the manor opposite it. Are you still unwilling to leave? Do you need us to get Lord Feng Chao and Feng Xiong again before you are willing to give up? Seeing how the youth who had just been driven out like a beggar had returned, the 2 guards standing in front of the entrance frowned in displeasure. You're right. I have decided that I am not going to leave after all. Get Feng Chao and Feng Xiong out here to meet me, Feng Zhouge replied smugly. His confidence had returned along with his cultivation. You are just making things harder for yourself. One of the guards harumphed before entering the manor. Not too long later, Feng Chao and Feng Xiong, the 2 people who had insulted Feng Zhouge earlier, walked out. Feng Chao sneered coldly as he pointed right in Feng Zhouge's face. I was wondering who's looking for us, and it turns out to be the trash of the Inferno Phoenix clan. Was the beating earlier not enough for you? Do you need us to go for another? Ever since Feng Zhouge's cultivation began regressing, he had become a sandbag for the 2 of them to vent their anger on, and they did whatever they wanted to him. Peng. But before Feng Chao could finish his words, he was suddenly blasted right into the doors of the manor. The impact caused his face to turn pale, and he spewed huge mouthfuls of blood. You're right. The beating earlier wasn't enough. But this time around, we'll be swapping positions, Feng Zhouge sneered as he flitted right up to Feng Xiong. You! Feng Xiong had never thought that the trash they had been bullying for the past 2 years would be able to send his brother flying with a mere kick. Realizing that Feng Zhouge might have regained his cultivation, he immediately retreated fearfully. It was a pity that his speed was nowhere close to that of Feng Zhouge. A slap flew in his direction faster than he could dodge it. Pa! With a resounding echo, the arrogant Feng Xiong collapsed to the ground as his teeth scattered all over the floor. Feng Zhouge, you regained your strength. This is impossible. Wait a moment, what are you trying to do? Feng Chao, who had regained his consciousness, exclaimed in disbelief as he slowly backed away in fright. 2 years ago, this youth was the one person that everyone in the younger generation had looked up to and respected. So, when he fell from grace, those who had been envious of him made full use of the opportunity to trample on him, including those who had been close to him. Everyone thought that Feng Zhouge's era was long gone and that there was no way he could make a comeback. Who could have known that in a short hour, not only did he regain his cultivation, he even became more powerful than before? What am I trying to do? Nothing much. I'm just picking up the pieces of my dignity that have been robbed from me, Feng Zhouge replied with a chilling voice as he looked at Feng Chao with hostile eyes. It had not been easy for him to recover from his downfall, so naturally, the first thing he needed to do was pay back those who had put him down. He would make them know that they had chosen the wrong person to mess with. The man whom they had betrayed and callously spat on had returned to haunt them. Seeing how Feng Zhouge's aura was growing stronger and stronger by the moment, Feng Xiong gritted his teeth and bellowed, You no longer have our bloodline in your veins. You have already been exiled from the clan. If you dare make a move on us, the Inferno Phoenix clan will severely punish you. So what if Feng Zhouge had regained his cultivation? Earlier, when they checked his bloodline, they had found that his bloodline had nearly vanished. Even if he had regained his cultivation, there was no way he would be reaccepted into the Inferno Phoenix clan as a member of the core lineage without their bloodline. This would make him no more than an unaffiliated cultivator. With limited resources on hand, what he could achieve in the future would be capped as well. The God King realm would be a huge hurdle that he would never be able to overcome. Those words made Feng Zhouge stall. Feng Chao and Feng Xiong were right. It was unheard of for a person's bloodline to disappear just like that, but that was indeed the result of the test that he had taken earlier. Fearing that he would land his teacher in unnecessary trouble, he turned to look at Zhongxian hesitantly, only to see the latter replying with a smile. Since you have regained your cultivation, you might have regained your bloodline as well. Just do what you need to. I'm here anyway. Chapter 2189 Phoenix Stellar Formation. Based on what Zhongxian knew, the grey congregation of energy within Feng Zhouge's body would only consume his zhenqi, not alter his bloodline. Most likely, the reason his bloodline could not be sensed earlier was due to it being suppressed. However, with the grey congregation of energy cleared, he should have regained his bloodline. On top of that, given that his meridians had been cleansed by the Heaven's Path zhenqi, it would likely have become purer than ever. Thank you, Feng Zhouge said deeply before turning his gaze back to the manor. He was not certain about his bloodline returning, but no matter what, he would never forget the debt that he owed to his teacher. Paying no heed to the incapacitated Feng Xiong and Feng Chao, the two of them made their way through the doors and into the courtyard. The next moment, though, a group of people rushed forward to encircle them. It seemed like the news that Feng Zhouge had regained his cultivation and injured someone at the entrance had already started spreading within the mansion. To be able to gather so many people within just tens of seconds, the Inferno Phoenix clan was indeed formidable. As expected of the de facto leader of the 3 great clans, Zhouge, you have already been expelled from the clan. How dare you barge in here and wound our core members? Are you trying to stage a mutiny? A young man aggressively demanded. The current Feng Zhouge was nothing more than an outsider to the Inferno Phoenix clan. An outsider barging into their territory could be considered an attempt to challenge and undermine the Inferno Phoenix clan's authority. Humph. Feng Jiang, you sure are quick to pin crimes on me. I believe that the bloodline test earlier was inaccurate, so I came back here to have it tested again, Feng Zhouge replied nonchalantly. As long as I can clear the test, I will still be a core member of the Inferno Phoenix clan. If so, a spar between fellow clan members can't be considered a mutiny, right? Those words made Feng Jiang frown, and he took a closer look at Feng Zhouge. In just one short hour, the other party's aura had become completely different. It felt firm and unyielding. Just like him, the other party was at high-tier celestial god realm pinnacle. More importantly, his confident disposition felt exactly like 2 years earlier. 2 years ago, the other party had been a genius who dominated the younger generation. Viewed as one who would potentially become a god king in the future, there was no one who had dared cross him. Even Feng Jiang himself would have had to lower his head whenever he encountered Feng Zhouge, not daring to show the slightest hint of disrespect. Feng Jiang did not think that the trash of 2 years would actually be able to make a comeback. He found the situation very hard to accept. You want to test your bloodline once more? Feng Jiang burst into laughter. Do you think that our bloodline test is a joke, such that anyone can test it as and when they please? The bloodline test of the Inferno Phoenix clan was not cheap. Most disciples would only get a chance to test it once in their entire life. It was only due to Feng Zhouge's exceptional circumstances that he had been tested twice, and yet, he wanted to do it once more. Did he think that he was in the same position as he was 2 years ago, that he could do as he pleased? I have the money to pay for it. Feng Zhouge replied coldly. Even though his cultivation had been slipping continuously over the past 2 years, he still had quite a substantial fortune to his name. It was nothing much compared to Zhongxian, but it was more than enough for him to pay for a test. You'll fork out the money? Feng Jiang harumphed coldly as he struggled to think of a reason to stop Feng Zhouge. He had a feeling that things would go awry if he allowed Feng Zhouge to do as he pleased. At this moment, an idea suddenly came to his mind, and his lips crept up mockingly. Well, no matter what, you still used to be a core member of our clan. It's only right for us to give you a chance. Clear the 9 Phoenix stellar formation. If you can clear it, we'll allow you to return to the clan and have your test. Otherwise, I'm afraid that there's nothing much we can do. Yes, that's right. Clear the 9 Phoenix stellar formation, and we'll give you a chance. Didn't you regain your strength? Prove it. As long as you can clear the 9 Phoenix stellar formation, we'll recognize you. Otherwise, you only have yourself to blame for your weakness. The crowd gathered in the area burst into laughter as they watched Feng Zhouge mockingly. The 9 Phoenix stellar formation. Feng Zhouge's face immediately turned grave upon hearing those words. Oh ho! Why do you have such a look on your face? Are you not confident in clearing the formation? If that's the case, we'll just have to take this incident as a deliberate attempt to undermine the Inferno Phoenix clan's honor. Men, capture him and drag him over to the hall of interrogation. We'll have to question him properly to see what his true motives are. Feng Jiang said with a grand wave of his hand. Yes. 4 young men immediately walked out from amid the crowd. Let's go, our dear young master Zhouge. Even if you have regained your cultivation, without your bloodline to back you up, you are nothing more than an unaffiliated cultivator. Did you think that things would return to how they were 2 years ago just because you have regained your cultivation? Feng Zhouge was not a bad person at heart, but having achieved success at a very young age, it was inevitable that he became complacent and arrogant. Furthermore, there was no one who dared to talk back to him and correct his attitude. This had resulted in him looking down on his peers, so his relations with the others in the clan were not good. What is the 9 Phoenix stellar formation? Zhongxian asked Feng Zhouge with a frown. Teacher, the 9 Phoenix stellar formation is the only way that members who have been driven out of the Inferno Phoenix clan can be recognized by the other clan members. It's a formation made up of 9 experts within the clan. One has to defeat all 9 of them in order to clear the trial, Feng Zhouge replied with a slightly pale complexion. In the past 3,000 years of our clan's history, there were 317 expelled members who returned to challenge the 9 Phoenix stellar formation, but in the end, only 3 of them cleared the trial. As for the rest, they lost their lives while challenging the formation. They're dead. Zhongxian was taken aback. Out of 300 people, only 3 people had managed to clear the trial. That was a 1% probability of success. Even though those members were driven out of the clan, no matter what, they still shared blood ties with one another. Surely there was no need to be so vicious with them. More often than not, those who are driven out of the clan have committed some sort of heinous sin that makes them deserving of such treatment. There is almost no one who welcomes their return. For this reason, those who challenge the 9 Phoenix stellar formation are often viewed with hostility. Those who have been selected to conduct the trial won't hold back against them, so they won't hesitate to resort to vicious strikes. If the 9 Phoenix stellar formation is that dangerous, and there is no one within the Inferno Phoenix clan who is willing to recognize them even if they return, why would they still challenge it despite the risks? Zhong Xian asked. In his view, it seemed ridiculous for one to brave such danger, only to become a person that was snubbed within the clan. If no one was going to accept them in the first place, it would have been much easier for them to live in the outside world. In the first place, if they were talented enough to clear the 9 Phoenix stellar formation, they would probably fare well anywhere else. Feng Zhouge shook his head and replied, "Teacher, there's actually a deeper reason for them challenging the 9 Phoenix stellar formation. Regardless of whether they clear the trial or not, they will be buried in the ancestral grave. This might appear to be nothing much, but this gesture effectively means that their descendants have a chance to return to the Inferno Phoenix clan. On the other hand, if they don't attempt the trial, it means that they will be permanently severed from the Inferno Phoenix clan." Hearing those words, Zhong Xian nodded in agreement. A fallen leaf returns to the ground. Most people would wish to return to their origins after their death. Furthermore, this concerned the future of their descendants as well. So, most of those who challenge the 9 Phoenix stellar formation are those whose lifespan is already reaching its limit. In other words, they have already steeled their will to die in the trial. For this reason, the 9 Phoenix stellar formation is also called the suicide formation. With an awful complexion on his face, Feng Zhouge remarked grimly, "Their very suggestion of having me challenge the 9 Phoenix stellar formation is as good as condemning me to death." He was only in his early 20s, and he still had many years ahead of him. It was clearly inappropriate for him to challenge the formation in his state. How strong are the opponents one will have to face in the trial? Zhong Xian asked. The 9 Phoenix stellar formation consisted of 9 cultivators. As important as the formation was, what was even more crucial was the strength of the 9 cultivators. They are of the same power level as the one challenging the trial. In other words, it is a 1 versus 9 scenario. Given that we possess the same bloodline, and they have been augmented by the formation, how can one possibly clear this trial through normal means? Feng Zhouge cried in despair. On the other hand, Zhong Xian burst into laughter. He had been wondering how scary the 9 Phoenix stellar formation was, but it did not seem like anything worth worrying over. Everything aside, even the Dragon Gate formation that Zheng Yang had gone through to become the progeny of combat was much more difficult than this. Chapter 2190 Challenging the Trial. The Dragon Gate formation that Zheng Yang had gone through consisted of the dragon tail, dragon body, and dragon head, and in every phase of the trial, he had to face someone who was even stronger than him in terms of cultivation. In order to clear the trial, he would have to defeat everyone. It was clear that the 9 Phoenix stellar formation paled far in comparison. Granted, the formation itself might be harder to deal with, but if the challenger could manipulate the formation to their advantage, it could make the battle easier. Every formation was bound to have its weaknesses, and as long as one could find these weaknesses and exploit them, it would become a supporting force. The stronger the formation was, the more effective it would be to exploit these flaws. Without a doubt, Feng Jiang will be participating in the formation as well. 2 years ago, even though there was some gap between our fighting prowess, it wasn't too big. During the period when my cultivation regressed, he was cultivating hard, and he made full use of the cultivation resources that the clan gave him. Given so, it would be difficult for me to defeat him in a normal battle, let alone having to face a formation that consists of him and 8 equally powerful opponents. Feng Zhouge's voice was filled with despair. He did not think that he could win this battle. Over the past 2 years, he had not been able to receive any cultivation resources from the clan. As such, even though he had regained his cultivation, his progress was bound to be much slower than the other party. Furthermore, Feng Jiang still was not the strongest cultivator in their power class. It could be said that his death was guaranteed if he agreed to challenge the 9 Phoenix stellar formation. Seeing how shaken Feng Zhouge was, Zhongxian sighed deeply before looking straight Feng Zhouge. "Zhouge, do you trust me?" "Of course." Feng Zhouge nodded right away. If not for his teacher, he would probably have wasted his life away in despair and depression. It was the other party who gave him hope and a new life. Who else would he trust if not his teacher? "If you trust me, accept the other party's challenge and face the so-called 9 Phoenix stellar formation," Zhongxian said. "We are going to accept the trial." Feng Zhouge was stunned. "But rest assured, nothing will happen to you," Zhongxian said with a chuckle. "All right then." Feng Zhouge was a little uncertain where this was going, but seeing how confident his teacher was, he eventually nodded. With a wave of his hand, he stopped the 2 young men who were walking toward him and said, "I agree to it. I'll face the 9 Phoenix stellar formation." "You'll face the 9 Phoenix stellar formation?" Those words left everyone dumbstruck for a moment. Even Feng Jiang thought that he had heard wrong. "Are you certain?" He was the one who had suggested it, but he had never thought that Feng Zhouge would accept his ridiculous demand. After all, it was so dangerous that only those who were on their deathbed would think of attempting it. As someone who had become a high-tier celestial god in his early 20s, Feng Zhouge had a long life ahead of him, and there was a good chance that he could achieve great things even outside the Inferno Phoenix clan. There was a need for him to court death like that? "Of course," Feng Zhouge replied. "You must have become much more powerful after you regained your cultivation." "Very well, let me see just how capable you are." Feng Jiang sneered. Without any hesitation, he pushed his feet against the ground and dashed forward. At high-tier celestial god realm pinnacle, Feng Jiang was just a notch beneath the god kings. His movement caused the air in the courtyard to grow heavy as the powers from nature surged toward him at a rapid pace. It seems like he has already comprehended some of the secrets of a god king. As expected of an expert of the Inferno Phoenix clan, Zhongxian thought. In terms of individual strength, Feng Jiang was probably beneath Ao Hua of the Sky of Cloud Dragon. However, just looking at how easily he was able to tap into the powers of nature, it was clear that he had a preliminary grasp of some god king powers. It would be difficult to subdue him in a direct clash of powers. Facing Feng Jiang's attacks, cold sweat trickled down Feng Zhouge's back. Even though he had managed to make a breakthrough earlier, it did not change the fact that he had been crippled for 2 years. Putting aside the fact that he could not utilize his newfound strength properly, his ability to use the powers of nature was also lacking greatly in comparison to Feng Jiang. His chances of achieving a victory were very slim. Peng peng peng. Within 3 blows, Feng Zhouge was already forced to retreat 7 steps. While neither side had sustained any injuries, it was already clear who was the stronger of the 2 from this. "You aren't even a match for me, but you want to challenge the 9 Phoenix stellar formation?" Feng Jiang harumphed coldly. "You sure are brazen." "I." Feng Zhouge gritted his teeth furiously. He turned to look at Zhongxian with an indignant expression. He would not have been a match for the formation even at his peak 2 years ago, let alone in his current state. He had no idea why his teacher had asked him to accept the trial. Shaking his head, Zhongxian turned his gaze to Feng Jiang and smiled. Zhouge would indeed be unable to clear the 9 Phoenix stellar formation in his current state, but can you give us 2 hours to make some preparations? That should be more than enough for him to clear your formation with ease. "Who are you?" Feng Jiang asked with a frown. As Zhongxian had been standing behind Feng Zhouge the whole time, Feng Jiang had assumed that he was Feng Zhouge's subordinate. However, from what had just been said, it was apparent that he was wrong. "I am Feng Xian. I am a member from the side family who has returned for the tournament," Zhongxian replied calmly. "Feng Xian?" Feng Jiang was stunned for a moment before he scoffed disdainfully. A mere member of the side family dares to make such boastful claims. The key difference members of the side family and members of the core lineage lay in the purity of their bloodline. Even if they were of the same cultivation realm, due to the difference in bloodline, the members of the side family still would not be a match for members of the core lineage. Thus, it was utterly absurd for a member of the side family to make such a huge claim. It was really a wonder what gave the other party the confidence to boast like that. I don't see anything wrong with that. There's no reason a member of the side family would be inferior to a member of the core lineage, Zhong Xian pointed out with a composed smile. Preposterous. Men, take that brazen young man down, Feng Jiang roared. Voila. The two young men from before stepping forward once more to grab Zhong Xian's arms simultaneously. But before they could even touch him, Zhong Xian suddenly shook his shoulder twice. Peng peng. With two dull thuds, the two young men were knocked into the nearby wall. Judging from their pained expressions and how tightly they were clutching their chests, it seemed like they had sustained quite the injury from the earlier encounter. What? Feng Jiang narrowed his eyes in astonishment. He was capable of pulling off the earlier maneuver as well, but he was not confident of pulling it off as smoothly and leisurely as the other party did. Could it be that the other party, despite being from the side family, was actually even stronger than him? This explains why you dared spout such brazen words. It seems like you aren't as inept as I thought. Very well, let's see what kind of ability you have. With a cold harumph, Feng Jiang released an intimidating aura as he dashed right toward Zhong Xian. He was using the same move that he had used to curb Feng Zhouge, and based on the domineering pressure he was exerting, it seemed like he had decided not to hold back at all. This is a great opportunity, Zhouge, so make sure to keep your eyes open and watch carefully. It would have been more difficult to impart these theories to you without showing you the practical side of it. Even in this tense moment, Zhong Xian turned his attention over to Feng Zhouge and spoke with a calm voice. Since he's using the same move against me as well, I'll show you one way you can counter his offense with your current strength. As he spoke, he stepped forward till he was roughly 5 meters away from Feng Jiang before finally coming to a halt. For some reason, the very act of stopping at that point seemed to have disturbed Feng Jiang's offense. It was clear that the momentum of Feng Jiang's offense had taken a nosedive, as if someone had severed his flow of energy. The main difference between Feng Jiang and Feng Zhouge's strength lay in their ability to tap into the natural energies in the surroundings, and the spot that Zhong Xian had walked over to happened to be the Mingmen L of this battle technique. By standing in this spot, Zhong Xian had managed to sever the flow of energy into Feng Jiang, leaving the latter with no choice but to rely solely on his cultivation. However, Feng Jiang was no weakling. Noticing Zhong Xian's intention, he immediately began driving his zhenqi to its limits and augmented the might of his strike so as to avoid losing momentum. As a result, he was able to retain the might of his offense. Over the past 2 years, Feng Jiang had managed to reinforce his high-tier celestial god realm pinnacle again and again through the extravagant use of cultivation resources within the clan. While he was still a way off from becoming a god king, there was no doubt that he was far stronger than most of his peers. In fact, it was questionable whether the genius of the Qi clan, Qi Yu, would be a match for him. Mingmen is a traditional Chinese medicine term, but in the context of martial arts, it refers to a blind spot or the location of a weakness. Chapter 2191 Impartation. Despite facing such a strike from Feng Jiang, Zhong Xian showed no signs of wanting to dodge. Instead, he calmly placed his hands behind his back, as if opening himself up for Feng Jiang. And just as the strike was about to connect, Zhong Xian suddenly pouted and blew out lightly. Hula! His breath formed a surge of sword qi that, like a pin piercing a balloon, popped the ferocious might behind Feng Jiang's attack, causing his energy to dissipate into the surroundings. It was a rather bewildering maneuver that seemed to defy common sense. Ding 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 ding. Alarmed, Feng Jiang immediately launched several other strikes to follow up, but the same thing happened again and again. It was like rain falling on an umbrella. No matter how Feng Jiang tried to attack, none of the attacks landed. Instead, the dissipated energy from his offense caused a depression everywhere else except for a 2 meters radius where Zhong Xian was standing. Zhong Xian walked in front silently amid Feng Jiang's attack, undoing each and every strike of his with just a blow of his breath. It was almost as if he was a tiger walking amid a pack of goats. It was very clear who the predator was and who the prey was. Zhongxian glanced at Feng Zhouge and imparted his first teaching of the day. No matter how powerful an attack is, as long as you are able to find its weakness, you will be able to overcome it easily. This applies to everything. Your opponent is rarely as frightening as you think. Then, in the blink of an eye, Zhongxian traversed across the uneven ground to appear around half a meter away from Feng Jiang. On the other hand, Feng Jiang was already in full panic mode. He had not expected the other party to be so powerful that even his strongest attack was not doing a thing at all. Seeing how the other party had managed to close the distance so easily, the flustered him immediately attempted to leap backward so as to distance himself from the other party. Yet, during his movements, his leg seemed to trip on something. Peng! Just like that, he fell to the ground and cloaked himself in a layer of dust. The surroundings fell completely silent. The spectators saw what happened clearly. Feng Jiang's fall was caused by the young man stretching out his leg to trip him. This was a very low-tier move that usually only happened in a scuffle among ordinary people. None of them would have imagined that they would see someone using such a move in a battle between two high-tier celestial god, much less that it would actually be effective. Knowing what everyone was thinking, Zhongxian chuckled softly as he said, "It's foolish to rank maneuvers as if they belonged on a hierarchy. What works works." Under normal circumstances, such a simple move would not even work on a low-tier celestial god, let alone Feng Jiang. However, as reality had shown, it turned out to be extraordinarily effective. It was not that Zhongxian's legs had some kind of magic that allowed them to trip anyone that he wanted to with perfect accuracy. However, it was simply the easiest maneuver to make for him to subdue his opponent in that context. Feng Jiang's offense had already been unraveled by him, and his mind had already been shaken, so he was in no state to keep tabs on his surroundings. Furthermore, they were in close proximity to one another. All these conditions allowed Zhongxian's simple maneuver to work with extraordinary effectiveness. A duel was not just about who was stronger and faster, or else it would be nothing more than pitting numbers against one another. "Did you learn anything from that?" Zhongxian asked as he calmly walked back to Feng Zhouge's side. Based on what he had seen thus far, the cultivators in the firmament were simply too reliant on their cultivation, bloodlines, and battle techniques. They would release their zhunqi and create all sorts of hoo-ha in their battle. It was true that putting on an imposing front would unnerve the opponent, but the key to winning a battle was not the flowery movements one made, it was one's ability to take everything that was happening into account and react flexibly. One could throw out 100 punches in a second, but if none of them struck the opponent, it would be nothing more than a show. In fact, more often than not, the key to winning lay in just one good punch. With quivering lips, Feng Zhouge nodded in a daze as he murmured, "I think I understand." He knew that his teacher would have to be in the top 30 of a sky's board of potential god kings in order to obtain the Great Displacement Teleportation formation, so it should not be too difficult for him to defeat Feng Jiang. However, he did not think that his teacher would actually be this powerful. Then again, it was one thing to be powerful, and it was another thing to make someone else powerful. He really could not imagine anything that his teacher could do to allow him to clear the 9 Phoenix Stellar formation within just 2 hours. "Is that so? What did you comprehend from that then?" Zhongxian asked. Feng Zhouge pondered for a moment before replying, "A move is only strong if it lands on the opponent. Otherwise, it's nothing more than a performance." "Indeed. Your understanding is spot on," Zhongxian replied with a nod. He had noticed that Feng Zhouge was a smart person who could catch on quickly as long as one dropped some hints before him. It was a pity that Feng Zhouge had wasted his last 2 years, but he was confident that the young man could swiftly surpass the others as long as he was given proper guidance. It was for this reason that Zhongxian had dared claim that he would make Feng Zhouge strong enough to clear the trial within 2 hours. He might not even need that long. While Zhongxian was talking to Feng Zhouge, Feng Jiang rose to his feet and asked doubtfully, "Are you really a clan member from the side family?" Even though he felt humiliated by the earlier display, he took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. "UN." Zhongxian nodded quietly. "If you don't believe me, you can always check my bloodline." With the disguise amulet in hand, he was confident that he would be able to clear all sorts of checks with ease. Feng Jiang assessed Zhongxian for a moment before turning his body around. Wait there for a moment. I'll report this matter and have the 9 Phoenix stellar formation prepared. Feng Zhouge has been expelled from the clan, so he must go through the trial in order to return. On the other hand, you are a member of the Side family, so you need not undergo the trial. As long as members of the Side family could reach a certain cultivation realm, they would be entitled to a chance to verify their bloodline. Given how he was unable to defeat the other party, it was obvious that the other party had already met the minimum requirement. Zhongxian nodded in response before turning his attention back to his disciple. All right, we should start on your training. Most likely, it should take at least 2 hours to prepare the 9 Phoenix stellar formation, no matter how efficient the Inferno Phoenix clan was. That was more than enough time for him to impart his combat insights to his new disciple. Activating the impartation of Heaven's will, Zhongxian began his lecture. Initially, Feng Zhouge was still feeling very iffy about this entire matter, but as soon as he heard the first word, the anxiety in his heart vanished, and he found himself completely absorbed in the lecture. The knowledge that his teacher was imparting to him was far more profound than what he had learned in the past. The more he learned, the more he realized how shallow his understanding of combat had been. It was only when Feng Jiang returned once more that Feng Zhouge returned to his senses. By this moment, his anxiety had already been replaced entirely with anticipation. He was looking forward to testing what he had just learned. It had not even been 2 hours yet, but his comprehension of combat and battle techniques had risen to a whole new level. In fact, when he looked back, he could not believe just how ignorant he had once been. To be honest, he was not sure if he could clear the 9 Phoenix stellar formation in his current state, but he felt like he at least stood a chance. Thank you, teacher. Feng Zhouge kneeled to the ground yet again and kowtowed deeply. He did not know how else he could thank his teacher other than that. He felt like all the suffering he had gone through was worth it. It had allowed him to meet his teacher, and that was all that mattered. In terms of comprehension of combat, he felt like the only one who could match his teacher was the old ancestor. Meanwhile, Feng Jiang's complexion turned a little awful when he saw how Feng Zhouge, a highly esteemed genius of the Inferno Phoenix clan in the past, was kneeling and kowtowing to a member of the Side family. But in the end, he chose not to say anything. Instead, with a cold harumph, he gestured for the two of them to follow him with a swerve of his head. Following Feng Jiang, it did not take long for the two of them to arrive at the destination. Right before them was a dueling ring sealed up tightly by dozens of massive phoenix sculptures. Feng Jiang paused for a moment before speaking. This is the training ground of our Inferno Phoenix clan. The 9 Phoenix stellar formation has already been prepared, but it's not too late if you wish to back down now. You won't be able to turn back once we start the trial. While he harbored a deep grudge against Feng Zhouge, he did not hate him to the point that he wanted him to die. It's fine. I have no plans of backing down after coming this far, Feng Zhouge replied. Since you have made up your mind, let's begin. Without any hesitation, Feng Jiang walked straight into the center of the dueling ring. Wang. With a slight buzz, the mist shrouding the dueling ring dissipated, revealing another 8 figures within. Feng Shu, Feng Yuancheng, Feng Qingyang. Recognizing the people inside the dueling ring, Feng Zhouge clenched his fists tightly. He had thought that he would only face opponents around Feng Jiang's level, but it seemed like he had underestimated the trial. With just a swift count, there were at least 5 cultivators in there who were even stronger than Feng Jiang. How was he supposed to win this? Chapter 2192 Breaking the Formation. This was especially so for Feng Shu. He was known as the strongest cultivator beneath God Kings in the Inferno Phoenix clan, and he was ranked 3rd on the Sky of Spirit Origins board of potential God King. In the past, the reason Feng Zhouge had been so highly regarded in the clan was because of his talent, not his fighting prowess. Feng Shu was already in his 600s, which meant that the chances of him reaching God King were extremely slim. It was for that reason that the clan had favored Feng Zhouge over him. However, his fighting prowess was definitely not for show. Just the fact that he was in the 3rd place on the board of potential God Kings was enough to leave most people despaired. Are you frightened? Zhongxian suddenly asked. No, that's not it. I'm just not very confident. Feng Zhouge replied. Even though the earlier lecture had opened his eyes to many things, he had not had time to put his new knowledge into practice. As such, he was not sure how far he could go with the knowledge that he had just absorbed. If he slipped up inside against so many powerful experts, he might really lose his life. As long as you are able to put what I have taught you into practice, you will be able to overcome the formation easily, Zhongxian reassured him calmly. I understand. Feng Zhouge nodded. Taking a deep breath, he tossed aside all his doubts and leaped right into the dueling ring. As soon as he stepped into the dueling ring, the 9 opponents that he was going to face suddenly vanished from sight. The formation had concealed their presence, preventing Feng Zhouge from perceiving their whereabouts. Feng Zhouge warily took a step forward, but all of a sudden, he felt a chilling sensation behind him. Teacher said that such a situation is likely to be a decoy. If I turn around, it would be as good as leaping right into the enemy's trap. It's also highly likely that they will have a countermeasure on the off chance that I rush forward in an attempt to barge out of their encirclement. The only step I can make is to return to my position while launching an offense. Without any hesitation, Feng Zhouge stepped back to where he had been standing previously. It was an extremely dangerous move to retreat when there was someone coming at him from behind. One mistake, and he could be impaled by the enemy's weapon. However, he had no other choice given the situation. So, as soon as he placed his foot on the ground, he immediately whipped up his other leg to kick right in front of him. Peng! He could feel his leg striking something. It seemed like there was indeed a person there. This. Feng Zhouge's eyes lit up in excitement. To be frank, he was still in the phase where he was trying things out to see if the theories really worked in practice. So, he did not really bear much hope regarding it, especially since it was clear that he was in a disadvantageous position. So, he was pleasantly surprised to see that it had actually worked. Teacher said that if my attack connects, in order to prevent me from following up with another strike, those at the side will surely make use of this opportunity to assault me. In order to overcome such a situation, there's no need for me to make any elaborate dodging maneuvers or run away. All I have to do is return to the spot where I stepped forward to earlier. Feng Zhouge recalled Zhongxian's teachings. The fact that there was no one who attacked him earlier when he stepped forward meant that there was no enemy there. He could exploit this fact to his advantage. Thus, he took a step forward once more, and he immediately felt 2 forces colliding against one another behind him. It worked. Seeing how things worked just as his teacher had said, as if he had predicted all of this beforehand, Feng Zhouge trembled in excitement. That being said, he did not allow his excitement to get the better of him. He decisively twisted his body 90 degrees before kicking toward a certain spot. Peng! There was yet another dull thud. Another opponent who was trying to make a sneak attack on him ended up being kicked in the chest before he could land his attack. With everything that had happened so far going just as his teacher had planned, Feng Zhouge finally cast away his fear and devoted his all to the battle. Meanwhile, outside the dueling ring, on another side of the ring from Zhongxian, there was a tower that rose into the clouds. There were several elders looking out of the window from there. Feng Zhouge actually regained his cultivation and willingly challenged the 9 Phoenix stellar formation. I must say that I didn't expect such a development, a grey-bearded elder said. He was the first elder of the Inferno Phoenix clan, Feng Danqing. Previously, he had held high hopes for Feng Zhouge. He had thought that the young man, just like the clan head, would eventually rise to the heights of a god king and expand the Inferno Phoenix clan's influence. Never had he expected that the young man's potential would suddenly vanish just like that. Over the past 2 years, he had called in many favors from his close physician friends, but none of them had been able to solve his condition. Left with no choice, he could only cast Feng Zhouge aside. After all, even though he was the first elder, he had to be accountable to the rest of the clan. But who could have known that Feng Zhouge would be able to make a comeback shortly after he was expelled from the clan? Not only so, he even confidently challenged the 9 Phoenix stellar formation. Just what did Feng Zhouge encounter in the hour that he was gone? I had my men look into it, and it seems like right after he left the clan, he encountered a descendant of our clan outside. The latter treated his condition and helped him make a breakthrough in his cultivation, the old man standing beside Feng Danqing said. He was the second elder, Feng Tianyun's. I heard that the descendant defeated Feng Jiang in a battle? Feng Danqing asked. Yes, I heard the same. It seems like he's no ordinary person, Feng Tianyun remarked. Feng Zhouge seems to have changed quite a bit as well over the years. It was unfortunate that his cultivation started regressing for no reason, but it did help him to mature quite a bit. Even if he doesn't clear the 9 Phoenix Stellar formation, he's still qualified to return to our clan. Feng Danqing stroked his beard as he spoke. Feng Tianyun nodded in agreement. As elders of the Inferno Phoenix clan, they prioritized the interests of the clan over everything else. Naturally, they would be delighted to have Feng Zhouge back if he really had regained his cultivation. It was just that being expelled from the clan was not a matter to be made light of. In view of the pride of the clan, they could not allow a person to simply join and leave the clan as they pleased. So, the trial had to continue. It was just that they had the discretion to decide which side should win. Feng Danqing quickly counted the time that had elapsed since Feng Zhouge entered the formation before instructing. Be good for Feng Zhouge to face a bit of hardship in the trial, however, tell Feng Shu and the others that it will suffice to make him suffer a bit. Just don't do anything that will hurt his foundation and affect his future cultivation. The 9 Phoenix Stellar formation was a particularly powerful formation within their clan, such that not even Feng Danqing and Feng Tianyun could peer through the mist to see what was happening within. The formation allowed Feng Shu, Feng Yuancheng, Feng Qingyang, and the others to pool their powers together synergistically. Even if Feng Zhouge was 3 times stronger than he still would not stand a chance. The only reason Feng Danqing had allowed the trial to go ahead was to temper Feng Zhouge's character, hoping that he could rid himself of complacency and work harder in the future. All right, I'll send the message right now. Feng Tianyun nodded. A moment later, however, a slight frown appeared on his face. They aren't answering. Could it be that Feng Zhouge is so weak that he couldn't even survive the first phase of the trial? Even if they wanted to temper a person, the person should at least be strong enough to be tempered. If Feng Zhouge was so weak that he collapsed before the others could utilize their full prowess, he could only blame himself for his weakness. Killed. Feng Danqing also frowned as well. He immediately ordered, stop the formation. All right. Feng Tianyun flicked his finger and infused a surge of his energy into the mist. Even though it appeared that the 9 Phoenix Stellar formation was controlled by the 9 cultivators within, in truth, the master key was still in their hands. They could stop the formation with a mere thought. Who? The air in the dueling ring jolted violently before the mist began dispersing. If Feng Zhouge couldn't even last for 3 minutes, I must say that it doesn't matter even if he died in the trial. Feng Tianyun harumphed. But before he could finish his words, he saw the real situation in the dueling ring and froze. Feng Danqing's eyes also nearly bulged out. In the dueling ring, Feng Zhouge, whom they had thought might have lost his life, was chasing after his opponents spiritedly, whereas Feng Shu and the others could only tremble in fear as they retreated again and again. Chapter 2193 Bloodline Test. How is this possible? Feng Tianyun was speechless. Even he did not have the strength to deal with Feng Shu and the others. In fact, even the god kings of the clan would face some difficulty trying to subdue such a powerful lineup of cultivators. Yet, how long did Feng Zhouge take to pull it off? 5 minutes. In less than 5 minutes, all 9 of them were already pummeled enough to fear Feng Zhouge and run away from him so desperately. Was there not something very wrong here? Feng Danqing was similarly bewildered by the sight before him. Subconsciously, he had already decided that Feng Zhouge would suffer a tragic defeat in the trial. Yet, events had not unfolded as he expected. Looking at the dueling ring, it was Feng Zhouge's opponents who were running away from him as if he was the devil. All of you, squat down on the floor, hold your heads, and declare that you have lost the duel. We have lost the duel. The trembling Feng Shu, Feng Jiang, and the others immediately did as they were told. Their faces had been punched so badly that one could hardly tell them apart. That's more like it. Feng Zhouge nodded in satisfaction. After that, he leaped out of the dueling ring and walked over to Zhongxian's side before bowing deeply. Teacher, I have managed to clear the trial. Words could not begin to describe how just much he respected his teacher at that moment. Through his teacher's impartation, he had been able to easily predict where the next attacks would come from. Not only so, he had even managed to figure out the weaknesses of the formation. By exploiting the weaknesses of his opponent, he had defeated them easily, just as his teacher had told him. Before Zhongxian could respond, a voice suddenly echoed from afar. Congratulations, Zhouge, for clearing the 9 Phoenix Stellar formation. I welcome you back to our clan. Following that, First Elder Feng Danqing and Second Elder Feng Tianyun walked over. Even though they had no idea what had caused Feng Zhouge to change so much, there was no denying that he had indeed become strong. First Elder, Second Elder. Feng Zhouge quickly clasped his fist to greet the 2 elders. The 2 elders nodded in response to Feng Zhouge's greeting before turning his gaze to Zhongxian. I heard that you are a descendant of our clan, Feng Danqing said. Zhongxian clasped his fist and replied, Yes, I am Feng Xian. Good. Let's test your bloodline together with Zhouge's. As long as you are able to reach the level of purity expected of an external member, I'll accord you the title and privileges of a core member, Feng Danqing said. Based on what they had heard so far, the changes in Feng Zhouge likely had something to do with Zhongxian. Furthermore, the strength that he had displayed thus far was definitely not beneath that of Feng Zhouge's. As long as the other party possessed the bloodline of their clan, it would be foolish for them not to nurture such a talent. After saying those words, the first elder flicked his wrist and took out a round stone. We call this artifact the Phoenix Resonance Stone. It's even more accurate than the blood reservoir in testing out one's bloodline, Feng Danqing explained. If a person possessing the bloodline of the Inferno Phoenix clan drip their blood on the stone, a fire phoenix will surface on it. The clearer the phoenix, the purer one's bloodline. I understand. Feng Zhouge nodded as he took the Phoenix Resonance Stone from the first elder's hand. In the previous test, it had been found that his bloodline had completely vanished. Due to that, he had been expelled from the clan. He could not help but feel a little apprehensive as to what was going to happen. He took a deep breath to calm himself before nicking his finger and dripping a droplet of blood on the Phoenix Resonance Stone. Wang! The brilliant call of a fire phoenix echoed in the air. The outline of a fire phoenix swiftly formed on the stone before becoming clearer and clearer. Despite its miniature size, one could see its wings fluttering as it flew around the surface of the stone. It appeared so lifelike that it seemed as if it would soar out into the sky at any moment. Formation of the phoenix, convergence of flames. The purity of your bloodline has reached the 8th level. Not only did you regain your bloodline, it has become even purer than before. Feng Danqing was shocked. All in all, there were 10 levels to the bloodline of the Inferno Phoenix clan. Over the years, their bloodline had become sparser and sparser, such that those who could reach the 3rd level were already eligible to be considered a part of the core lineage. As for the side family, due to frequent intermarriage with humans and other beasts, there were some of them who would struggle to even trigger the Phoenix Resonance Stone. Feng Zhouge's bloodline had been tested for the first time shortly after his birth, and it had been found that the purity of his bloodline was at the 6th level. That was more than enough to put him at the forefront of the clan. Who could have known that he would overcome his previous record, reaching the frightening 8th level? With such a level of purity, he was practically set to become a god king in the future. Feng Zhouge was also a little taken aback by the results. His bloodline had become even purer after he regained it. He subconsciously turned to look at his teacher once more, and if it was possible to materialize his emotions, Zhongxian would have been drowning in an ocean of admiration. He knew right away that it was the doing of his teacher. There was no way his bloodline could have become purer for no reason. To achieve what was thought impossible, it seemed like his teacher's capability had really reached an unfathomable level. Feng Danqing turned to Zhongxian and said, "It's your turn." To be honest, he was quite curious about how this Feng Xian would do in the bloodline test. Without the support and backing of the clan, he had still become a high-tier celestial god at such a young age. Could his bloodline possibly be even purer than Feng Zhouge's? Zhongxian took the stone from Feng Danqing's hands, but he did not prick his finger to conduct the bloodline test right away. Instead, he turned his attention to something else. Wang. The disguise amulet that Luo Ruoxin had given him began to work its wonders, turning his bloodline into that of the Inferno Phoenix clans. Only after that was done did he take out the God King sword and create a small incision at the tip of his finger. He had made sure to conceal the God King sword to make it appear no different from any other sword so as to avoid stirring a commotion. Unless he wielded it in battle, even a God King would be unable to tell the difference. A droplet of blood fell onto the Phoenix resonance stone. Nothing happened at all. There was no fire phoenix or anything else appearing. It appeared that Zhongxian's blood was completely ineffective. "Are you sure you are from our clan?" Feng Danqing asked with a frown. Feng Tianyun was also confused. Unless a person was absolutely certain that they were from the Inferno Phoenix clan, they would not have dared to walk right into their home turf, claiming to be one of them. Zhongxian was dumbstruck as well. If one could peer into his mind, one would probably see a mountain of question marks piled up. Could it be that the Inferno Phoenix clan's bloodline was too advanced for the disguise amulet that Luo Ruoxin had given him to emulate? Ha ha ha, this sure is weird, isn't it? Should I try again? If he could not get the Inferno Phoenix clan to recognize him, he would not be able to enter Spirit God Palace. If he could not enter Spirit God Palace, how was he supposed to find Luo Ruoxin? You can only test your bloodline once. Halfway through Feng Danqing's words, the stone in Zhongxian's hand suddenly flickered a little as a brilliant phoenix abruptly surfaced. It was not shrouded in flames, and it was unable to soar freely. Instead, it seemed to be swimming weakly on the surface of the stone. The flash of a phoenix, a deficiency in vigor. This is the mark of a third-level bloodline. You barely qualify as a core member, Feng Danqing announced as he patted his chest in relief. While it was not as amazing as they had hoped, a third-level bloodline was decent. After all, Feng Danqing himself only had a fourth-level bloodline. Congratulations, Feng Xian, for having returned to our clan. From today onward, you shall be a member of our core lineage, and you'll be entitled to all the privileges of a core member, Feng Tianyun proclaimed loudly. Then, he passed a token over to Zhongxian and said, "This is the token that represents your identity. With it, you can receive stipends and cultivation technique manuals from the clan every month." "Thank you." Zhongxian accepted the token. While the results were not as amazing as when he had disguised himself as Luo Tianya, it was perfect for him. The disguise amulet might have sensed his inherently low profile and humble disposition, so it had adjusted itself accordingly so that the results were just enough for him to join the Inferno Phoenix clan. In any case, all that mattered was that he was finally there. Who? In this moment of celebration, no one noticed that the fire phoenix, which was soaring freely around the stone, had flown to the bottom of the stone and suddenly plummeted from the sky, crashing to the ground. It had abruptly lost all its strength. At the same time, the old ancestor of the Fire Phoenix clan, the Fire Feather conferred God King, suddenly opened his eyes. Chapter 2194 Melodramatic. The bloodline test of the Inferno Phoenix clan was designed to test the similarity of a descendant's bloodline to that of the Fire Feather conferred God King. The Phoenix Resonance Stone was actually an artifact created from his bloodline. That being said, the testing of a descendant's bloodline usually would not faze him at all. But for some reason, his heart suddenly began pounding quickly in agitation. It was like something was squeezing his soul tightly, leaving him breathless. "Your sovereignty." The Fire Feather conferred God King widened his eyes. He was a conferred God King, and there was only one type of existence in the world that could leave him feeling like that. But the God Monarch of the Sky of Spirit Origin had already breathed his last breath. So why was it that he could still feel the other party's aura? I might just be thinking too much. Even if our God Monarch revives, the process is unlikely to be so quick. The Fire Feather conferred God King shook his head as he remembered the words that the God Monarch had told him back then. Still, I should check on it just in case. So, the fire feather conferred God King closed his eyes and focused his attention on that sensation that he had just felt. It was a fleeting feeling that had disappeared as quickly as it appeared. He tried to grasp onto the feeling, but for some reason, it felt like something was standing in his path, something reminiscent of the heavens. Even with his strength, he was still unable to trace the origin of the feeling. Eventually, he could only shake his head and give up. Since that was the case, there was no point in him thinking too much into it. His time would be better spent raising his cultivation. The firmament was in an unprecedented era. It was an era in which even god monarchs could lose their life if they got careless. If he, as a conferred god king, did not try his best to raise his cultivation, he could very well lose his life in the next flood of spiritual energy. The old firmament was as calm as a lake of stagnant water. Most conferred god kings lived their lives peacefully before coming to the end of their time. Everything had changed so quickly within such a short period, be it the receding of spiritual energy, the occurrence of the flood of spiritual energy, or the rise of the heaven subjugation monarch. It was no longer a safe haven for conferred god kings. For this reason, most conferred god kings devoted their time to cultivating if they did not have anything else to do. All they wanted was to become strong enough to survive through this turmoil while protecting their clan. With his official acceptance into the Inferno Phoenix clan, Zhongxian received the right to participate in the internal selections for the tournament. All in all, the internal selections lasted 3 days, and the results were pretty much determined right from the start. There was no one in the Inferno Phoenix clan who was a match for Zhongxian, so he easily took first place. As for Feng Zhouge, he naturally claimed second place. When news started spreading that the person in first place was an unknown figure who had just returned to the Inferno Phoenix clan and the second place was a young man who had once been expelled from the Inferno Phoenix clan, a huge commotion broke out in Spirit Origin Royal City. Those two dark horses were indubitably strong contenders for the champion seat of the upcoming tournament. Zhongxian knocked on Feng Zhouge's door and said, "The tournament among the 3 clans will be held on the day after tomorrow. Since there isn't anything today, I hope that you can lead me to the abyss where the mishap occurred." The Inferno Phoenix clan had set the date of their internal selections to end 2 days before the official tournament so that their candidates would at least have a day to rest properly. Since he had some free time, Zhongxian hoped to take a look at the abyss to uncover the mystery behind the bizarre grey congregation of energy. Feng Zhouge was a little apprehensive at heading to the abyss once more, but recalling what his teacher had said about the possibility of a relapse occurring, he bucked up his courage and nodded. It had not been easy for him to regain his bloodline and cultivation. He was not ready to lose it once more. The two of them were core members of the Inferno Phoenix clan, and after the internal selections, their reputation and prestige were currently at their peak. In terms of standing within the clan, they might even be higher than the elders. As such, there was no one who stopped them leaving the clan. The two of them got onto an aerial celestial beast, and in less than 2 hours, they were standing right beneath the floating city. The floating city that seemed to block out the entire sky was being propped up by a single feather. This feather emanated a light golden glow and seemed a little reminiscent of the sun's rays. Curious, Zhongxian activated his eye of insight to examine the feather closely, and he realized that it looked surprisingly familiar to him. He tried to jog his memories, but somehow, he was unable to recall where he had seen it before. Eventually, he shook his head and put that matter to the back of his mind. Beneath the floating city was a pitch-black abyss that seemed to stretch endlessly downward. It felt like terrible things were lurking within the cryptic darkness. "Teacher, I went down from here before," Feng Zhouge said as he pointed to the cliff by the side. Zhongxian turned his gaze over and saw a small man-made passageway right next to the cliff. It circled the walls of the abyss downward. "Let's head down to take a look." Zhongxian instructed the aerial celestial beast to wait for them by the side before walking over. The passageway was narrow enough to allow only one person to pass at a time, and by the side was an abyss that was unimaginably deep. All it would take was one misstep for one to fall into oblivion. Following closely behind Feng Zhouge, the two of them slowly made their way down the abyss. The abyss commanded a powerful presence that suppressed even his heaven's path Shenqi, making it difficult for him to drive his cultivation. Fortunately for him though, the pathos of heaven that he had cultivated seemed to be impervious to that. Just like that, they traveled downward for 2 hours amid unnerving silence, but they were still nowhere close to reaching the bottom of the abyss. Suddenly, Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up, and he took out the pendant hanging around his neck. Feeling the slight warmth that it was emanating, he muttered, "It seems like Ruoxin has been here too." The two of them continued walking for a while longer, and some time later, Feng Zhouge finally came to a halt. He glanced backward and said, "Teacher, we have come to the end of the path. Back then, I also came to this point before falling into some bizarre location. It was then that my cultivation began falling rapidly. He had nearly lost everything the last time he was there. He was not willing to let it happen to him once more." Hearing those words, Zhongxian looked forward and saw that the narrow passageway had indeed suddenly vanished. Most likely, the cultivator who created this passageway had either passed away at this point or returned along the path. "It doesn't seem like there's anything special here. What was the content of the mission that led you here?" Zhongxian asked curiously. Like the 6 sects of the Azure, the clans in the firmament often sent their members to carry out missions so as to temper their strength and character while gathering more resources for the clan. However, the abyss was completely barren. Other than the endless darkness that followed them everywhere they went, there was nothing there at all. It did not make sense for a member of the Inferno Phoenix clan to head down there for a mission. Legend has it that there is a herb in the abyss that can help a cultivator become a god king, and that herb is known as the grass of God King, Feng Zhouge explained with a reddened face. "I thought that the rumor was true, so I came here to give it a try." "Grass of God King?" Zhongxian pondered for a while before shaking his head. Putting aside whether such a thing existed or not, even if it did, it would not be so simple as to allow one to become a god king just by swallowing it. Becoming a god king required one to have a thorough grasp over the powers of nature, and that was not something that a medicinal herb could help with. That being said, even if the grass of God King only increased one's chances of making a breakthrough, it was still more than enough to draw countless cultivators over to try their luck. After all, becoming a god king was a great honor in the firmament. There were just slightly more than 100 god kings in the firmament, so the temptation of being able to rise to a position that others were unable to was particularly alluring. "Wait here for a moment. I'll head down to look. If I don't return within 4 hours, I want you to head back up without me. Don't attempt to come down to find me," Zhongxian instructed sternly. If Feng Zhouge headed down with him, it was likely that his cultivation would get sealed by the grey congregation of energy once more. Since that was the case, it would be better for Zhongxian to proceed alone. "Teacher, you must stay safe." Seeing how his teacher was venturing on fearlessly despite the dangers in order to resolve the possible complications of his condition, Feng Zhouge's eyes reddened in gratitude. He was just an ordinary student, but his teacher was willing to go so far for his sake. This was an expedition that could possibly cause one's cultivation to vanish, but his teacher did not show the slightest hesitation. With such a teacher, what else could he ask for in life? Zhongxian responded with confusion. He could not understand why Feng Zhouge was looking at him with eyes so filled with passion that he actually felt goosebumps all over. "What is wrong with this child? I'm just heading down there to take a look, and I'll return as soon as I encounter danger. Is there a need for you to be so touched? Please. We're not shooting a melodramatic soap opera over here. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.